Welcome, everyone, to Talk with Sally. My goodness, I was cutting that one a little close. Hope everyone had a fantastic day today. Welcome, Julian. Welcome, Wim. Wim, I think, is a new person. Welcome. Tonight, as I'm getting ready to set everything up, which is too late to do edits, I spelt the last name wrong. So we are going to talk about Che Guevara, and can I slow down my brain? I spelt it CH. So I apologize for that. I will fix it later. You guys know, I gotta hold on one sec. I gotta pull up. Can you tell that I scrabbled until the very last minute? Oh my goodness, I'll take a deep breath here. Woo. Anyway, I'm really excited. I was trying to figure out what we were going to talk about today. So I go through YouTube and I try to find something that has to do with Gladio. Well, this time we took a break from Gladio for just a minute, only because I needed a break. There was so much cognitive dissonance that went along with it that I had to take a break from it for a minute. We talked about transhumanism for the last 4 episodes that we did here on Rumble and on YouTube and on X. And welcome, JJ. And what's crazy is I always thought that transhumanism and continuing education or lifelong learning, not to be confused with continuing ed, right? Let me turn my mic. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I've always thought transhumanism was going to be a cyborg. Like you're going to have wires, you're going to be half man, and you're going to operate. And after the research I've done, I've come to realize, and we're going to do a wrap up on it, but not tonight, because I wanted to put more thought into it, because I took a bunch of notes. I just wasn't all the way there. But I think it's going to be more like the Matrix type thing. If anyone's ever seen it, I saw it for the first time last night. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've never seen it. But I feel like it's going to be more like that augmented reality. Anyway, that is not our topic for tonight. But all the topics that we've been talking about they all center back to what is going on in the world, military-wise, government-wise, deep state. Some people call it the cabal. I call it the deep state of the world. It's a global thing, or Gladio units, or Gladio, which is a different term for secret government. So now when I see documentaries or I see things put out there, I have these Gladio goggles now. So I see things with a different lens, and everything I've read, everything I see is completely different. So tonight we are going to talk about Che Guevara, and he is thought to have been, the New World Order, but I say Gladio only because if you understand Gladio, every military operation, even the whole Iran-Israel thing, has a completely different meaning. Everything is completely different than what the media or our government tells us it is. And when you start seeing things with an open eye and a different lens, everything is different. And it actually, on one hand, it pisses you off. On the other hand, you don't get, I don't get anxious like I used to do about things going on in the world, because I understand it. Therefore, I just prepare my household and try to share the message out into the world with people so that they may be educated and may prepare accordingly. So anyway, I came across this guy because I wanted to know his story. So he was in South America, and Brazil and South America is big time into not necessarily the news, but on Twitter, there's a big group of people from but Brazil, that their government is out of control. And what I mean out of control as far as suppressing language, controlling what they can say, like putting people in prison. They are fining Elon Musk. Is it $100,000 per person per day of who he won't expel or take down their accounts? Something ridiculous. I don't know the exact numbers, but anyway, our last Gladio session, we covered Gladio south of the border. And country by country in that region, they went through and they had some form of a coup using Gladio soldiers. And so and it's crazy because we covered that episode. And within 2 weeks after that, all this stuff started happening. Well, it was happening before then. It just came to my attention at that point. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get this. And it's not, and they think it's other governments. They don't realize it's the United States and their Gladio soldiers trying to decide who they're going to put into power, kind of like they did with Biden and Trump. Anyway, so I came across this guy, and everything that I was seeing, some are saying he's good. Some people are saying bad. And I from what I understand, he did kill a lot of people. It just begs, we'll talk about it more after we're done. So what I've done is I've gotten 3 different perspectives. Okay. So I've got the perspective from, I actually like this channel, but I'm not really liking his reporting on it. So Forgotten History is a channel that I like to get a lot of my docu-series from. They're usually pretty in the middle. This one, I kind of, either they don't have the correct information. Hi, Mrs. Mack. So either they don't have the correct information, or I'm going to assume that, because if they would have dug deep enough, they would have seen different perspectives. But anyway, so we're going to watch it one through. It's 13 minutes. And like usual, I'll stop as it gets. Oh, hi, Griffin. I will stop during the relevant points of this docuseries to talk about it. And then we are going to watch it from, so I'm so mad that I spelled this person's name wrong. I hate it when I do that, especially, well, don't ever set up a stream without your glasses on. You can't see. Okay, for one. But anyway, so Che Chevara is originally from Ireland. So we are going to take it. So he's got from like the Irish mob type family. So we're going to watch a documentary that is 30 minutes long we're going to watch 30 minutes from someone from his country. And then I found an AI. This is amazing. I found an AI translation of one of his speeches. And that's what prompted me to look. So I originally heard that this morning, the AI version. I'm like, I've got to look and see what the narrative is according to our government and according to the history. So then I went through, hi, P digits, Finkel and Einhorn. Welcome. So what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to read you the definition of who this guy is. Well, definition or description from Google, because you know that we can always trust Wikipedia, right? So I wanted to read what they say about him. And then we are going to listen to these 3 different narratives. And then I want to discuss it and see if our opinions have changed. So let me see here. So Ernesto is his first name, and Che, I guess Che is just kind of like, hey, how do you do? Hey, Che, you want to go get coffee? So it's just like a common name. So Ernesto Che Guevara was an Argentine Marxist revolutionary physician, author, guerrilla leader, diplomat, and military terrorist, a major figure of the Cuban Revolution. His stylized visage has become a ubiquitous. Oh my God. My tongue is tied. Okay, slow down, Sally. His stylized visage has become a ubiquitous countercultural symbol of rebellion and global insignia in popular culture. So automatically they have painted him as a Marxist. He was a guerrilla leader, right? I do know that. But anytime the Wikipedia says that, I always have to dig a little bit deeper because it's not necessarily always the case. So, hi, LW, how are you? So let's go. So that's what Wikipedia says. And I didn't look into all of his crimes, and I know that he did a lot. But anyway, however, I want to try to get Colonel Townsend on here because she explains the connection with Cuba and how they originally weren't communist. However, they wanted to get out from under the thumb of the United States because the United States had pretty much occupied them because of the cocaine trade there. And in order to get out from under them, they formed an alliance with Russia, who they say is communist. Well, Russia had kicked out a lot of the communist people, the Bolsheviks, and they went off to Germany and they did their whatever there, right? So, and I don't know how long, I don't know the whole history of Russia, so I can't say when they were communist or when they were communist or to what extent. I'm just saying there's a lot more to the story, and I get told I'm Alex Jones for questioning it, and I'm going to question it, and I've heard a very different narrative. So hopefully I can have her come on sometime and explain that connection. They are going to mention it here. So if you kind of think about that, so as they're going through and explaining this, there's more to the story, and I found it very, very fascinating. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the first one. And if at some point this is taking longer than we thought, we can push pause and continue on Tuesday night. However, this was kind of like fascinating me. I think I watched like 3 more hours of documentaries on him, of different people and their perspective. And of course, one of the perspectives was from a CIA agent. And maybe on Tuesday, we'll watch that. After watching these and watch that, it might be interesting to see the different narrative that comes out from that. I don't know. They were similar, but a lot conflicting. And it depends on, are you on this side or that side, or are you a neutral party? Okay, here we go, guys. If you can't hear, okay, I'm going to push play, and then I will do my typical pause, and let's do a sound check. I do not want to blow out your eardrums. That is not my goal. So let's go ahead. Hold on. For some reason, my earbuds didn't connect earlier, and I forgot. Guys, anyway, I hope you guys, George Bush, Miss Barbara, Bay of Pigs, and Dallas. Yes. And the Bay of Pigs stuff was a different story. You're going to hear it in here, because when you have someone that is not from the United States and doesn't know the history that we've been taught, it comes across a little different. They think that it was more JFK that was involved in the Bay of Pigs fiasco, what it was a CIA. Yeah, November 22nd, CIA. Absolutely, Mike. I agree with you. And we have talked about that previously. Okay, I've got my audio hooked up now.
As the Cold War increased in momentum, the Soviet Union and China began funding, fostering, and actively supporting communist insurgencies around the world.
Do you think I've got to add it to the screen first, or put on? I added it. I just didn't put the right screen on. There we go. Let's try this again, y'all. I'm so blessed that you guys are so patient with me. Thank you.
The Soviet Union and China began funding, fostering, and actively supporting communist insurgencies around the world. Their primary...
Okay, I'm pushing pause just so you guys can make sure. Hi, Kari, how are you? Make sure the sound is okay. Hi, Just JR, how are you? Yeah, it's very helpful when I do things the proper way. All right, sound check. I'll wait 20 seconds. Okay, I'm going to assume it's good because I haven't heard any complaints. And I'm going to mute my cam for 3 seconds because I've got to wipe my itchy nose because I've been outside all day.
As the Cold War increased in momentum, the Soviet Union and China began funding, fostering, and actively supporting communist insurgencies around the world. Their primary locations were Africa, Central and South America, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia, where most of these former European colonies were ripe for being influenced. For the United States, the greatest threat was just 90 miles south of Florida, Cuba, and the communist dictatorship established by Fidel Castro and his proxies throughout Latin America. Who was Ernesto Che Guevara? How was he important to the global Marxist revolutionary movement? Why was he considered both toxic and dangerous to his communist supporters and the United States alike? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps scout sniper, history professor, historian, and book author. And we've answered these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History. Ernesto Che Guevara was born June 14, 1928 in Rosario, Argentina, and was the eldest of 5 children in an upper-class Argentine family of pre-independence immigrant Spanish and Irish ancestry. Guevara grew up in a family that had communist sympathies and supported the Republican Communist forces in the Spanish Civil War. He was an
Okay, remember that anytime the government has labeled a group of people communist sentiment, especially during this time period, a lot of times that was simply a way to go after them. During these documentaries that we're going to watch, they're going to call them leftist. I want you guys to remember that our parties have switched a lot in the last, I don't know, significantly since Obama took office. So when they say leftist, think more of a right winger who wants independence, who, you know, that type of thing. So when they say communist, I want you to remember that during Gladio, they used communism as a way to go after people. Sometimes they were, so not all the time it wasn't, but that was an excuse that they used.
An active athlete and was competitive in swimming, football, or soccer, if you will, golf, cycling, shooting, and was a professional rugby player. He was also a chess master as a teenager, taught by his father, and attended the University of Buenos Aires, where he graduated and then enrolled in medical school. His favorite subjects in school included philosophy, literature, mathematics, engineering, political science, sociology, biology, history, and archaeology. This is where he began fine-tuning his Marxist ideologies. Guevara traveled throughout Central and South America and was radicalized by the poverty, hunger, and disease he witnessed, blaming the American-owned United Fruit Company, among others, for the conditions. In Guatemala, he was supported by President Jacobo Arbenz Guzman, who had nationalized land owned by the United Fruit Company, almost 300,000 acres, and he also started land reforms, confiscating land from wealthy families and redistributing the property of the peasants. The United States became aware in May 1954 that a ship carrying infantry and light artillery weapons was dispatched by Communist Czechoslovakia for the Arbenz government. The CIA response was to support an armed force of several hundred anti-Arbenz Guatemalan refugees and mercenaries led by Carlos Castillo Armas to remove Arbenz from office. And on 27 June, Arbenz chose to resign and Armas became president. This event drove Guevara deep into the communist camp. Unfortunately, where Guevara failed in his logic was the fact that the American companies in Latin America provided jobs to the locals that they would otherwise not had. Guevara had become a known quantity, and he was a hunted man, and he sought refuge in the Argentine embassy until he could be given safe conduct to Mexico. As a result of this perceived exploitation by the wealthy capitalist nations, he firmly adopted the Marxist mantra of a workers' revolution. Guevara swore on a photograph of Joseph Stalin to become the ultimate communist. Guevara arrived in Mexico City on 21 September 1954 and worked in the allergy section of the General Hospital and at the Hospital Infantil de Mexico and lectured on various medical subjects. His first wife Hilda noted in her memoir, My Life with Che, that for a while Guevara considered going to work as a doctor in Africa, and that he continued to be deeply troubled by the poverty he saw and blamed on capitalism. While in Mexico City, Guevara met Raul and Fidel Castro, and he joined their 26th of July movement, then sailed to Cuba aboard the yacht Granma to assist in the overthrowing of U.S.-backed Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. Upon landing, many of the 82 men on board were either killed in the attack by Batista's forces or executed upon capture. With only 20
Just so you know, the United States wanted Fidel Castro to be in office. If you remember clear back to Gladio, the way the industrial war complex worked is they needed money for their black operations. So what they would do is they would go to Burma, Thailand area. They would sell weapons that were black market weapons They would sell them in Thailand. They would get heroin for it. They would then take the heroin to Italy, different places in that area, and then they would have it shipped out to either Corsica or to Cuba to have it cut. And then they would put it on a ship either through oranges or through, like from Italy, it was in chocolates. In Cuba, they would put it in oranges and fruit and stuff like that. And then they would ship it up to either Florida or directly into the port in New York and bring it into the Bronx and that area. And they would get that money. They would the mob would do that. So they give it to the mob. The mob would handle all that stuff through different Homeland Security, DEA agents were in on it. Anyway, they would then launder the money. It would end up back to the Vatican. And then from there, the Vatican took 10%, and then they would be routed to different types of banks. So that's a high overview of this whole entire role in Cuba. So just remember that when we're looking at this. And so when Fidel Castro gets put in, everyone's like, oh, he's a communist. They were going to get these missiles and they were going to bomb us, right? Maybe, maybe not. I wasn't there. I know that my history, there's a lot of things that I've been lied to about. So I question the narrative, and I've heard it very much differently. I just can't remember the whole background of it. Anyway, so kind of have a different, like I know the whole Cuban Missile Crisis, and the people that were flooding Florida were a lot of Gladio soldiers. Anyway.
22 men, including Guevara, remaining to join Castro's fledgling force. Guevara soon rose to prominence among the insurgents for his intellect and tactical knowledge, and was promoted to second in command, and he played a key role in the 2-year guerrilla war that finally removed Batista. After the revolution, he led the Council of Justice that reviewed the cases and approved of the firing squads for Cubans deemed to have not supported.
Okay, so I'm thinking that he was a rogue Gladio soldier, but I could be completely wrong. I'm not. No, he couldn't be, because he helped remove Batista, which makes me think that he was part of the guerrillas. So sometimes Gladio would hire guerrillas to do their bidding, right?
Support of the revolution. Che sent many people, even the innocent, to their deaths, which did not go unnoticed abroad. The numbers of those killed by Che Guevara personally number around 100, but of those killed at his direction, the estimates go as high as 20,000. Guevara became feared for his brutality and ruthlessness, including slow torture, even of family members of those who were accused of anti-revolutionary activities. In a February 5, 1959 letter to Luis Paredes Lopez in Buenos Aires, Guevara states unequivocally, quote, "The executions by firing squads are not only necessary for the people of Cuba, but also an imposition of the people," end quote. Alternatively, during the revolution, Guevara also made it compulsory for the literate members of the revolution to teach the illiterate how to read and teach other basic educational skills. He also created several medical clinics and trained local physicians to help treat illnesses that killed people outside of the developed world. Even basic treatments of common diseases, to include measles, chickenpox, and malaria, were rare and caused deaths among the poor. He also authored the books The Motorcycle Diaries, Guerrilla Warfare, Episodes of the Cuban Revolutionary War, while he was performing Cuba's banking and education systems, as well as helping create and modernize the Cuban military. Castro courted the Soviet Union and Premier Nikita Khrushchev, needed by Cubans to support and place intercontinental ballistic missiles there as a threat to the United States and support Cuban sovereignty as a Soviet ally. However, Guevara's ruthless executions had become an embarrassment for Castro, as he needed to court the Soviets, but also not antagonize the United States and alienate other Latin American leaders who feared a similar result in their countries.
It's hard for me to not add commentary. So what they're not saying there, you know what? I'm not going to give too much commentary right here. I'm just going to let this play out. We're gonna wait for the next one to see if they answer the answers, just to see the difference. Like, my knowledge wants to just like, okay, this is here, but I'm going to hold back my tongue just for a minute.
On June 12, 1959, Castro sent Guevara on a 3-month tour of mostly Bandung Pact countries, such as Morocco, Sudan, Egypt, Syria, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, Yugoslavia, and Greece, as well as the cities of Singapore and Hong Kong. Understanding that at some point the killing must stop, Castro sent Guevara out of Cuba, which allowed Castro to appear to distance himself from Guevara and his ruthless methods, which troubled the United States and even the USSR, which was reflected by some of the members of Castro's 26th July movement. When Guevara returned to Cuba, Castro had assumed total control, and Guevara became finance minister and head of the banking system and education. In retaliation, President Dwight D. Eisenhower sharply reduced United States imports of Cuban sugar, hurting the economy. At the end of 1960, as part of his economic reforms to offset the loss of the U.S. markets, he visited Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, North Korea, Hungary, and East Germany, and signed, for instance, a trade agreement in East Berlin on December 17, 1960. The result was abject failure, as those places did not have a free market economy and were therefore not strong enough to be competitive with or even supportive of each other. Following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion on April 17, 1961, Guevara went to Moscow and signed the agreement bringing missiles to Cuba. Guevara wanted this to be a public action, but Khrushchev demanded secrecy. Guevara was not pleased, hoping to have Cuba recognized as a nuclear power, and he openly stated that, quote, if Cuba was in control of the missiles, we would have fired them at the USA, end quote. Guevara's social reforms also targeted the gay community of Cuba, such as the arrest and torture of openly gay writer Virgilio Pifiera and many others who disappeared. There was no room for homosexuality in the new Cuba. On February 24, 1965, Guevara gave a speech in Algiers where he condemned the Soviet method of social and economic reforms and believed that basically Soviet communism was a fraud and was reverting back to imperialist capitalism. Since the USSR was the primary financial supporter of Cuba, this was not well received either in Moscow or Havana. When he returned, Guevara...
It's very interesting because I know the United States gave a lot of money to Cuba through black channels, not necessarily through the proper ones.
Disappeared from public view. On October 3, 1965, Castro publicly revealed an undated letter supposedly written to him by Guevara 7 months earlier and called Che Guevara's farewell letter. In the letter, Guevara reaffirmed his enduring solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, but declared his intention to leave Cuba to fight for revolutionary causes abroad. He also resigned from all of his positions in the Cuban government and Communist Party and renounced his honorary Cuban citizenship. Guevara then went to Africa with over 100 Cubans to assist in the communist efforts in the Congo, but the U.S. was well aware of his activities during the Congo crisis. The National Security Agency was intercepting all of his incoming and outgoing transmissions aboard the United States naval ship Private Jose F. Valdez, a spy ship listening post located in the Indian Ocean. The expedition was a complete disaster, and Guevara, with a dozen survivors, fled to Tanzania and stayed in the Cuban embassy in Dar es Salaam. He then went to Spain and met with former Argentine President Juan Perón, who was given sanctuary by Francisco Franco. Guevara told Perón of his plans in South America, in particular Bolivia, and Perón warned against it, predicting failure. On November 3, 1966, Guevara secretly arrived in La Paz on a flight from Montevideo, using the false name of Adolfo Mena Gonzalez. His cover was as a middle-aged Uruguayan businessman working for the Organization of American States. He would learn that Bolivia's Communist Party was a clown show, and he received no support from the people, who often informed on his units to the police. Now, the hunt for Guevara was on. Felix Rodriguez, a Cuban exile turned CIA Special Activities Division operative.
It kind of surprises me that it took them that long to track him down. You would think that I guess the technology is a little bit different then. It's almost as if they wanted him to not be found.
Operative and helicopter pilot advised Bolivian troops during the hunt for Guevara in Bolivia. In addition, the 2007 documentary, My Enemy's Enemy, alleges that Nazi war criminal, former Gestapo chief in Lyon, France, the notorious Klaus Barbie, advised and possibly helped the CIA orchestrate Guevara's eventual...
Okay, so the fact that Klaus Barbie definitely was Gladio. He was part of CIA. He's part of the P2 Masonic Lodge. So he's all part of all of this stuff. So this is prior. I think he died in 1967. So this is all Gladio south of the border. I think, did it start in 64? I think it started in 60, yeah, about this time, about 67, 69 is about when Klaus Barbie, what was he? The Butcher of Lyon. He was a, gosh, I'm on YouTube. I can't say that word out loud. He was part of the regime from World War II. He was high up there, and the Vatican helped him to escape to Argentina. And there they put him in charge of helping they put him actually in place to help set up the cocaine trade. He was a big part of that. And he actually helped get, in Argentina, what president did he help get installed? Anyway, he helped get, I'll have to look it up real quick, but he helped get one of the presidents installed that was favorable to the United States government. Yes, exactly, Wim. You got it. It's really dumb for educational purposes.
Certain words are taboo. Despite being hungry, haggard, and wounded upon his capture, Guevara was still defiant. On the morning of October 9th, Bolivian President René Barrientos ordered that Guevara be killed. Rodriguez and the CIA wanted him taken to Panama for further interrogation, but the order was carried out by Mario Terán, a 27-year-old sergeant. Guevara was shot 9 times by Terán. This included 5 times in his legs, once in the right shoulder and arm, and once in the chest and throat. Guevara's body was taken to Valgrande and photographed and identified. His hands...
I don't know, Wim, yes, he got off easy. I know that he did guerrilla stuff. I know that he did bad things. I also know there's a side to him that we're not taught in history books because they don't want us to know. I get the sense he would have been more, kind of reminds me of Cerisier from Haiti Barbecue, who they portrayed him as this monster gang leader. Yes, he's done bad things. However, everything he has been doing is for the people. So he's killed a lot of government officials. He's gone after a lot of the different gang members there. And it's been because other governments come into the country that don't belong there, like the United States, go in there and bleed the country dry of their resources. And if the United States allows them to take control of their country again, what they'll do is say, well, you can have your country back, but we're going to build a perimeter around these natural resources, and you're not going to have access to them. And they've done that in Iran. They've done that in Syria. They've done that in Turkey. So it's not a common thing. So when I look at Barbecue, yeah, he's done bad things. And I don't know. It's hard to say. What would you do if another country comes into your country and makes your life miserable and everybody else's? Do you go after those people? So he's been labeled this cannibal gang leader, when really the name barbecue comes from the fact that his mother used to barbecue food, and CVCA would bring it to the poor people and hand it out. So I don't know. So for me, I'm looking at Guevara in that kind of light. And I don't know. I'd have to do more research on it. I don't know. Well, listen to all of us. And you can tell me see if your opinion changes.
Were severed and sent to Buenos Aires.
Except for he did do a lot of bad things, Wim. Like he did do massive executions and public executions and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know though. It's kind of hard.
For positive identification and later sent to Cuba. On October 17, 1997, Guevara's remains, with those of 6 of his fellow combatants, were laid to rest with military honors in a specially built mausoleum in the Cuban city of Santa Clara, where he had commanded over the decisive military victory of the Cuban Revolution. A marker exists in Bolivia showing where he had been placed in the mass grave before the excavation and identification of the remains. Guevara's personal possessions, including his watch and pipe, are on display at the CIA Museum. Scholar, philosopher, writer, teacher, healer, revolutionary, mass murderer, and psychopath. Who was the real Che Guevara? Despite his controversial life and actions, Time magazine named him one of the most 100 influential people of the 20th century.
Okay, tell me this. If you're that awful, how do you get all of that recognition? How do you get all that? It just tells me there's something more that we don't know about.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History.
So there's that one. So the next one is going to be from an Irish person. So this is coming from someone that is from the United States. So we have United States history to go on. And then we're going to kind of see it from the perspective of someone who's out of the country. Never thought to do that. Listen to different history books from other countries. Be very interesting to see what they have to say. Excuse me, brain fart. What am I doing here? Focus, Sally.
Dr. Ernesto Guevara Lynch, better known as Che.
All right, sorry for that. It's coming. It's coming. Squirrel. Yeah, I had a total squirrel. Hi, Slidey Pie. Did he get recognized? Did he get like Servicier? No, sorry. No, I'm thinking of the Haiti guy for barbecue. Guevara. They actually well, no, let's listen to this because this is going to tell the story. I'll let these guys tell the story and I'll fill in the pieces.
Dr. Ernesto Guevara Lynch, better known.
I'm still mad that I spelled his name wrong. I hate it when I do stupid stuff like that. All right, no more ADD squirrel moment. Finish, focus. Here we go. It's hot in here. Whew, I'm gonna have to turn on the fan here. There we go.
Dr. Ernesto Guevara Lynch, better known as Che Guevara, is one of the most iconic and well-recognized revolutionary figures in the world. But too often he's seen as just this alone, an icon on a badge or a work of graffiti art on a street corner. It can easily be forgotten that he was a living, breathing, thinking human being like each one of us. And more than just a rebellious aesthetic, the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once described Che as not only an intellectual, but also the most complete human being of our age.
That's cool, Wim, that you're a Green Beret. That's awesome. You're going to find in here that the Green Beret soldiers, no, I think I listened to that in a different documentary. I don't think it's in this one. But in the end, the CIA, the Gladio soldiers, end up teaching his soldiers, his guerrilla warriors, how to fight, and they end up taking him out.
The aim of today's video is to take a look at the fiery life that Che led, to discuss his enduring legacy and cultural impact around the world to this day, as well as to provide a deeper insight into the specifics of Che's revolutionary politics from a modern Marxist perspective. But first, a word from today's sponsor, Ren, which has made this video possible. What is Ren? Ren is a website where you can calculate your carbon footprint, then offset it by funding a diverse mix of carbon reduction projects like tree planting, mineral weathering, and rainforest protection. By answering a few questions about your lifestyle, you can find out your carbon footprint and how to reduce it. Once you sign up to make a monthly contribution to offset your carbon footprint, you'll receive monthly updates from the projects you support. You'll also get to see what your money's spent on, with photos and details on every tree planted, every acre reforested, and every ton of carbon offset. Ren supports a number of important projects around the world, but my personal favourite is their mineral weathering project in Scotland, where degraded forest land is purchased, reforested, and restored in order to sequester as much carbon as possible using a cutting-edge carbon removal technique called enhanced mineral weathering. Learn more about this project and many more like it.
Okay, ask me why I watch commercials like this. This is someone else's hard work. So we will watch the commercial so they get their ad revenue that they deserve. And also I'll give you a link to his channel when we're done so that you can follow him and maybe watch some more of his stuff.
Over on ren.co, where you can sign up and help offset your carbon footprint. The first 100 people who sign up using the link in the description box below will have 10 extra trees planted in their name. Many thanks to Ren for sponsoring this video and making this all possible. In 1928, Ernesto Guevara, or Ernesto Guevara Lynch, was born to his father of the same name and his mother Celia de la Serna y Loza in Rosario, Argentina. His family was of mixed Basque-Irish descent, providing the basis for his father to later state that, "In my son's veins flowed the blood of Irish rebels." The Irish side of his family hailed from the Lynches of County Galway, who left Ireland in the mid-18th century. Despite being born with asthma, Che was and would remain for the rest of his life athletically active and fit, playing rugby for the Club Universitario de Buenos Aires, whose initials prophetically spelled out the word Cuba. While his family was relatively well off in Argentinian society, the young Ernesto's father exposed him to left-wing and Spanish Republican politics from an early age. With the large range of books available in his family home and his strong interest in reading and philosophy, Che studied the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Vladimir.
Yes, he's Irish. Very, very Irish. And just remember that JFK was from the Irish, right? He's Irish. He has Irish roots. And so you have to separate the Irish mafia, Irish mob from the gangster Italian mob families. They're very different and have different principles. I'm not saying either one's good or not, but they often say that the mob, which is tied to Gladio, assassinated JFK, and I guarantee it wasn't the Irish mob. So this guy's very Irish.
Lenin. A well-read student, Che excelled in school and went on to study medicine at the Universidad de Buenos Aires in 1948. Third-level education was a privilege in Argentina at the time, so he was quite fortunate to be given the opportunity to pursue his studies, eventually receiving an MD in 1953 and finally earning the formal title of doctor. During his studies, Che took a year off university to embark on a grand motorcycle journey in 1951 with a close friend of his, Alberto Granado, to volunteer at a Peruvian leprosy village. Famously documented in Che's best-selling memoirs, The Motorcycle Diaries, the 8,000-kilometer...
Oh, I gotta push pause real quick because this is a great map. You know that road that they want to build through the whole entire United States? This is perfect. So they wanted to go all the way through here, up through the Panama Canal, up through Mexico, up through Texas, up through Canada, and loop around and back in there. So that therefore they can create our 15-minute cities. Anyway.
The road trip took Che north along the spine of South America through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Panama. He also took a flight to Miami, Florida. This journey had a profound, life-changing impact on Che as he witnessed the suffering of various nations in Latin America caused by American imperialism. One particularly raw and evocative episode of his book illustrates an encounter with...
That is a key thing right there, guys. American imperialism. So a big thing that the United States does is they go in and say, we're going to liberate these countries from communism. They put people in place into the governments. They'll give them money. And for their help, what the United States does is they go in and they build factories and they buy land, they buy factories, and therefore the United States has a big stake in their country. And it's so kind of keep that in mind when they use these words.
Persecuted Chilean communists near the Chuquicamata copper mine in Chile as follows. Lying beneath the meagre shade of 2 lampposts on the arid road leading to the mines, we spent a good part of the day yelling things at each other now and again from one post to another, until on the horizon appeared the asthmatic outline of the little truck which took us halfway to a town called Baquedano. There we made friends with a married couple, Chilean workers who were communists. By the light of the single candle illuminating us, drinking mate and eating a piece of bread and cheese, the man's shrunken figure carried a mysterious, tragic air. In his simple, expressive language, he recounted his 3 months in prison and told us about his starving wife who stood by him with exemplary loyalty, his children left in the care of a kindly neighbour, his fruitless pilgrimage in search of work, and his compañeros mysteriously disappeared and said to be somewhere at the bottom of the sea. The couple, numb with cold, huddling against each other in the desert night, were a living representation of the proletariat in any part of the world. At the time, the Communist Party of Chile was banned by the so-called Law of Permanent Defense of Democracy. Guevara would later comment on the anger he felt at the sights he witnessed during his journey and how it shaped him.
If you guys remember through Operation Gladio in South America, a lot of the people that were labeled communist really were not communist. What they didn't like was these elite group of people. So you had high up people in the Catholic Church. You had different elite group of people that were suppressing the other people. So they were being suppressed, and these bigger people were taking everything, right? So what ended up happening is you had different priests and different bishops and stuff. I think it was more priests that were going against. They were going back to grassroots Christianity, like be kind to each other, let's help each other out. And they were labeled communists. They did a bunch of propaganda. By the way, this is very, very well documented. You can look it up yourself, so I encourage you to do so. But they would use propaganda. So Operation Mockingbird was full-fledged in South America as well, in Argentina, Brazil, everywhere. So they would put out pamphlets and labeling these people communist because they didn't think the way that everyone else. They were sick of people coming in and destroying their country and killing people and oppressing people. Kind of sound familiar, guys? So right now you could say that our leaders are communist, if you look at it that way. And what happens is those leaders who act that way said that we were communist. And so how does our administration treat us? Not very good, in my opinion.
As a revolutionary, sparking in specific his readiness to become a guerrilla fighter for the people. Now unable to sit still, Che would continue to travel throughout Latin America, although no longer on a motorbike, from 1953 to 1956. During his journey, the increasingly radicalized, now self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninists, Che wrote in a letter, "Along the way, I had the opportunity to pass through the dominions of the United Fruit Company, convincing me once again of just how terrible these capitalist octopuses are. I have sworn before a picture of the old and mourned Comrade Stalin that I won't rest until I see these capitalist octopuses annihilated." After getting caught up in
So capitalist octopus. Think of that more, and this is just dawning on me now, because this is the third time I've listened to this today, just because I wanted to make sure that I had everything in a row, but this just clicked. So think of a capitalist octopus. So you have someone at the head, and they have their fingers into everything. So is that capitalist? I don't really think that that's capitalist, but that's the word they used. People misunderstand capitalism all the time, and so they'll say it's capitalism that's destroying the world and the country. It's really not. It's these greedy octopus people. So say like Rothschild, Rockefeller, where they have their fingers in every country manipulating people and pulling the strings and buying plants, and they are getting rich off of the resources and the people are starving, and they are. I mean, what happens when people are hungry? They start to get violent, right? Because you'll do things for your family. Anyway.
and attempting to join the fight against the CIA-backed coup in Guatemala. Che moved to Mexico in exile along with a group of Cuban exiles he'd met along the way. This included the future leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, who fled Cuba after the 26th of July attack on the Moncado barracks in 1953. The attack becoming the origin of the name of the group's guerrilla army, the 20...
Okay, so just so you know, guys, in 1953, that is officially when the CIA was formed in 1947. Prior to that, it was the OSS. So in 1953, that is when they started doing their first Gladio operation in Italy, because they were actually starting to become communists there. Like, that was a real thing there. So they were actually becoming, the communists were outweighing the Catholic Party. So the People's Catholic, and I can't remember the name right now off the top of my head. But anyway, so that's where they did their first real Gladio operation, minus this stuff in Russia during World War II, but that was under the OSS. I digress. Anyway, so in Italy, so 1947 was their first Gladio operation to get the new leader installed. But 53 is when they started going all across Europe and into South America and doing different Gladio operations and doing coups and throwing out different governments. So kind of keep that in perspective. So Fidel Castro had to flee his country. He's in exile. So he's in Mexico, and so is Guevara. It's kind of why.
26th of July movement, or M26-7 for short. In Mexico, Che teamed up with Castro's small band of Cubans and began training to wage a guerrilla war in a renewed attempt by the Cubans to overthrow the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. Trained under Spanish Civil War veteran General Alberto Bello, Che was described as the best guerrilla of them all. During this time, Che married his first wife.
Okay, so US installed leader is in Cuba right now. Think of that for just a minute. There's a US installed leader in Cuba, and right now, this is right when they are big into running heroin out of Cuba.
Wife, a Peruvian communist by the name of Hilda Gade, although they would later get divorced in 1959. Che, intending to be the group's field doctor, departed in 1956 with just 81 other men in a small cabin cruiser named the Granma, which was designed to only hold 12 people. After being ambushed, this force was cut down further to a mere 22 people who would be forced to flee into the Sierra Maestra Mountains, and they began developing and expanding a people's guerrilla war against the Batista regime, taking root.
A people's guerrilla against the Batista regime. So the people are sick of the way things are.
Among the peasants of rural Cuba and establishing urban guerrilla networks in the cities. Che rose up through the ranks of the guerrilla army during this time, noted by Castro for his fearlessness, and was given command as El Comandante over his own guerrilla column. Che would later write a work of military theory on his tactics used during the Cuban Revolution in the 1961 book Guerrilla Warfare. In it, he also expressed many of his views on the conduct of a revolutionary and the discipline that people's fighters should adhere to. One of the great educational techniques is example, he wrote. Therefore, the chiefs must constantly offer the example of a pure and devoted life. Promotion of the soldier should be based on valor, capacity, and a spirit of sacrifice. Whoever does not have these qualities in a high degree ought not to have responsible assignments. By February 9th,
so he believed that it should be through example, and you should lead a pure life as well. Very interesting.
1958, the ranks of the anti-imperialist guerrilla army of the 26th of July movement had grown to 400. But this was dwarfed in size by Batista's US-funded forces, which were supplied with planes, bombs, military advisors, and napalm by the US military. However, a regime's advanced weaponry alone can't stifle a revolution. As summed up by the Chinese revolutionary leader.
Okay, so we're getting this history from someone who's not from the United States. So they keep saying a US-installed leader, Batista. So can you imagine that when Fidel Castro gets into leadership, what kind of, how mad they're going to be?
Mao Zedong, who led his own guerrilla war before Che Guevara. Weapons are an important factor in war, but not the decisive one. It is man and not materials that counts. Che Guevara waged a lightning campaign within his guerrilla column alongside his future wife, the guerrilla Alida March. Eventually, the Cuban Revolution would grow out of hand for Batista and the USA, culminating in the decisive M26-7 victory at the Battle of Santa Clara over a force of thousands, personally led and commanded by Che Guevara, whose outnumbered and under-equipped forces managed to defy all odds, leading to the flight of Batista and the eventual collapse of his regime. Che went on to assume important positions within the new progressive government, from managing the trials of war criminals from the old regime at
Okay, so they obviously won the revolution. Fidel Castro is put into power, and he is going to be put into powers of position where he's going to be holding trials for war crimes, and I think they're going to put him in charge of banking as well.
La Cabana prison, where he married Alida March, to pioneering the 1959 agrarian reform law. Che Guevara also spearheaded the hugely successful...
Okay, they went back in time because they went to 1961 where he wrote his book on guerrilla warfare, and now they went back. So I just keep track of the dates because dates matter.
1961 Cuban literacy campaign, which rapidly increased the country's literacy rate from 47% to 96%, one of the highest rates in the world at the time, in just 8 months. Che was sent on diplomatic missions to many countries such as Greece, India, Egypt, Morocco, and Japan. Because Che had such firm beliefs and principles, he often came into contradiction with many of the reactionary or imperialist leaders he met with. For example, in Japan, where he refused to honor the soldiers of the fascist Japanese Empire, citing their slaughter of millions of Chinese people. At the same time, he also became quite famous among many nations as a skilled and prominent statesman, going on to deliver important speeches at the United Nations. In 1961, responding to the nationalization of US companies by the Cuban anti-imperialist revolution and in response to the increasingly pro-Soviet line of the Fidel Castro government, under the highly anti-communist and interventionist Kennedy administration of the US.
Okay, so they're saying under the Kennedy administration. A lot of the stuff that happened in Cuba, Kennedy did not know anything about. So there was a lot of Gladio operations in Cuba that were taking place with heroin, and then and then they do cocaine out of Cuba, and then eventually cocaine, right? But Kennedy didn't know this stuff. So there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff that was going on. So right now, you have Fidel Castro as their leader. The CIA, so this is 1960, since 1947, they have been setting up an operation here where they are refining heroin and they're shipping it to the United States in order to get money for the industrial war complex, right? So when he gets put into power, they initially liked him, from what I understand, but I kind of feel like whoever said that is kind of wrong, because based off the history, the previous leader was installed by the United States. So I'll have to look deeper into that narrative. Where was I going with that? Oh, dang it. I don't know. So, okay. So in communist China, so they were against Japan. He's against Japan. But China also, their color revolution, that was actually Gladio. Those were Gladio operations that were taking place in China. I've never been to China. I don't know the exact history. I only know what we've been told, and that's all. Does that make sense? Like, there's a lot more to the China history that we get told a certain narrative, and because they're very private with their information, we don't know the whole story. I'm not saying that they're good people. I wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't want to be under constant surveillance, and the things that they're doing, I don't know.
USA, the CIA organized an attempted invasion of Cuba at the Bay of Pigs. To the humiliation of Kennedy, the invasion was crushed by the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces trained by...
Okay, so this is where this is where different countries' narrative shifts. Kennedy did not want the Bay of Pigs to take place. He was very angry about it. So he wasn't caught off guard or shocked by this at all. They weren't supposed to do this.
Che Guevara. This led to Castro proclaiming himself a communist later that year, after previously having denied it. While few would deny that Castro was a great revolutionary and a national hero, some would speculate whether his sudden ideological development had emerged out of genuine ideological conviction or out of a more pragmatic need to seek closer relations with the Soviets under Nikita Khrushchev in light of the mounting embargoes being placed on Cuba spearheaded by the US. Che Guevara and the Cuban government successfully managed to lead Cuba through the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay, so that's important, guys. So they were not originally aligned with Russia. It's kind of like what we've done right now with Russia. We've put sanctions on them. So they've leaned more on China and Iran and other countries because of the embargoes and the taxes and all the stuff that we've done. So think of this at the exact same time, the United States, because the CIA, Gladio, and let's back up for just a second. There's a official CIA of the government that runs in sync, that's on the payroll with the government. And then there's the secret or the black CIA that's part of this shadow government. So they're not elected officials. Those are the ones that are mad. Those are the ones that are, they're not being able to run their drugs in and out of Cuba like they want to. So Fidel Castro is causing them a lot of problems because they want to have their own country. Think about it. Their leading literacy went up dramatically in 8 months. So they're not suppressing their people. Do communist people, I don't know, maybe communist people teach their children. Seems like there's a lot of humanitarian stuff. The narrative just doesn't add up that I've been told my whole life.
Crisis the following year, after the US blockaded Soviet missiles for a proposed Soviet missile base on Cuba. Just one of many examples of the extreme imperialist aggression Cuba has had to deal with throughout the years. Che Guevara, now Minister of Industries, faced a number of growing ideological issues between himself and the rest of the government as relations between Cuba and the USSR strengthened. On a diplomatic trip to Algeria, he harshly condemned the Soviets, Castro's close allies, for having departed from its previously revolutionary.
Okay. So from right now, what it's seeming like, everything is going good. Everything's going good in their country. The U.S. has sanctions and they're struggling. So Fidel Castro is getting in close with the USSR. And so I'm thinking that maybe Fidel is starting to take on those ideologies and then bringing them to Cuba. So maybe they are starting to become communist. They're going to call this guy communist. They call him communist, but I'm starting to think that maybe he was anti and wasn't liking some of the things they were doing. I don't know. Let's keep watching.
Revolutionary socialist path, and instead embracing the path of revisionism under Khrushchev, which led to tensions mounting between himself and his comrades in Cuba upon his return. While Castro sought to emulate Khrushchev's Soviet model, Che condemned it and correctly predicted how it would lead to the restoration of capitalism in the USSR. In response to the revisionist Soviet argument that markets would have to be maintained indefinitely for communism to be achieved, Guevara wrote that, "We understand that the capitalist categories are retained for a time and that the length of this period cannot be predetermined. But the characteristics of the period of transition are those of a society that is throwing off its old bonds in order to move quickly into the new stage. The tendency should be, in our opinion, to eliminate as fast as possible the old categories, including the market, money, and therefore material interests, or better, to eliminate the conditions for their existence." The tensions over Soviet revisionism continued to grow with the Sino-Soviet split, when the then revolutionary People's Republic of China, led by Mao Zedong, who Che later visited personally, broke with the revisionist leadership of the USSR. While the Cuban government remained close to their Soviet allies, Che aligned with Mao and the anti-revisionist revolutionary path. Che notably commented that Trotsky, along with Khrushchev, belongs to the category of the great revisionists. Eventually, Che took the decision to leave Cuba, also leaving his wife and
So Mei Chong, from what I understand, he was put into place after the Color Revolution. I know that the Color Revolution was a Gladio operation. I'm kind of confused for a minute because I've got two narratives battling in my head. And I'm trying to make sense of, because this is what's good, is when you watch two conflicting documentaries and two different narratives, that's what you should do. You should think, gosh, what is the narrative here? But they're saying that for communism, capitalism needs to be sustained. But I thought capitalism was good. Isn't that that's what America was built on, was capitalism. So that confuses me. It almost sounds like he's talking about socialist capitalism.
children behind. A letter left by Che to Fidel Castro, read out in public, expressed his continuing loyalty to the Cuban Revolution despite their ideological differences. He wrote that, "Wherever I am, I will feel the responsibility of being a Cuban revolutionary, and I shall behave as such." In leaving his posts in the Cuban government, Che sought to continue his revolutionary guerrilla struggle against US-backed comprador regimes around the world. His whereabouts became mysterious and unknown as he secretly traveled to the Congo to assist the Simba Rebellion, an armed indigenous resistance movement against the Mobutu dictatorship. However, Che found little success, lamenting the corruption of the rebel leaders and eventually leaving due to failing health. Che journaled his experiences in his Congo diaries, which he called the story of a failure. After a brief secret return to Cuba in 1966, Che, who was being hunted by the CIA, traveled undercover to Bolivia in his final ill-fated guerrilla campaign. He had been warned by exiled former Argentinian president Juan Perón that his plan to...
Okay, Juan Perón was who the CIA ended up installing into Argentina.
to establish a guerrilla army in Bolivia and overthrow the Barrientos dictatorship there was suicide. Entering La Paz in the disguise of a middle-aged investor named Adolfo Mena Gonzalez, Che assembled a small band of Cubans, Bolivians, and Peruvians who called themselves Ejército de Liberación Nacional de Bolivia. The guerrillas waged a short-lived campaign of sabotage and ambushes, but they found themselves isolated and unable to rally any kind of deep support base among Bolivian peasants. Unlike in Cuba, Che Guevara was unable to root his guerrilla campaign firmly within the people, and eventually the campaign fell apart at the seams. The CIA had been hunting Che down ever since his departure from Cuba, and CIA operatives were advising the Bolivian army in their hunt to capture and kill Che. They eventually succeeded in capturing.
That's interesting because Juan Perón definitely was CIA. Well, CIA, the U.S. government wanted him installed along with the Vatican. Like that was, they orchestrated a coup. I'm wondering if he was part of the guerrilla warfare during that time, trying to organize the people. I need more now I need more details.
Che under the command of Cuban CIA operative Felix Rodriguez. Undaunted, Che remained fearless until death and spoke of the immortality of revolution in his final moments to the Bolivian soldiers who'd been guarding him. Before being put to death by a hesitating sergeant on the 9th of October 1967, Che's last words were to his executioner, "Shoot, coward, you're only going to kill a man." Months before his death, Che had written his own epitaph, stating that, "Our every action is a battle cry against imperialism, and a battle hymn for the people's unity against the great enemy of mankind, the United States of America. Wherever death may surprise us, let it be welcome, provided that this, our battle cry, may have reached some receptive ear, and another hand may be extended to wield our weapons, and other men be ready to intone the funeral dirge with the staccato singing of the machine guns and new battle cries of war and victory." Che's life is an inspiration which resonates with millions of aspiring revolutionaries and oppressed people around the world. Alberto Granado, Che's close friend who joined him on his famous motorcycle journey, wrote of his legacy after Che's death. "He was a man who fought and died for what he thought was fair. So for young people, he's a man who needs to be followed. And as time goes by and countries are governed by increasingly corrupt people, Che's persona gets bigger and greater, and he becomes a man to imitate." The iconic photograph taken of...
Okay, so Che Guevara uses the word imperialism a lot. And it's like definitions that I should know this definition. So let's get a definition out here. So imperialism is a policy or act of extending a country's power into other territories or gaining control over another country's politics or economics. So he's accusing the United States of getting involved in their politics and their finances. Geez, the United States never does stuff like that. That's just nuts. They don't do things like that, do they?
Che in 1960, Guerrillero Heroico, caught the imagination and attention of the world with Che's unwavering and determined expression. The photograph was described by the Maryland Institute of Art as the most famous photograph in the world and a symbol of the 20th century.
Wow.
Che Guevara's face features on the banners of anti-fascist football fans, on street art, on posters, and on the covers of albums. However, the actual story of Che that lives behind the iconic image is often glossed over or not fully known by those who use it. The legacy of Che and what he stood for is claimed by a large variety of groups throughout politics and popular culture as a broad token of rebellion. But for many, the finer details beyond this are vague and fuzzy. Perhaps more distasteful is the mass commercialization of his face by capitalist enterprises, wherein Che's image can be found everywhere on just about any piece of merchandise imaginable, offering consumerist placation to the world's oppressed masses in place of Che's revolutionary politics of liberation. The symbol of Che takes on a much more meaningful and sincere quality when it's connected directly to his personal revolutionary struggle and beliefs, such as the Ernesto Che Guevara lynch mural in the Derry Bogside, or the numerous pieces of street art depicting Che in the favelas of Buenos Aires. After his death, his image and name have been invoked by revolutionary groups and movements across the world, including the indigenous Zapatista rebellion in Mexico, and dozens upon dozens of other guerrilla movements across Latin America. There are a large number of statues and monuments to Che in various countries around the world, including Cuba, Argentina, Bolivia.
If he was such a bad person, I want to know, okay, first of all, I want to know who he was attacking, which is a big missing piece. Was he going after civilians, or was he going after, I don't know, maybe elitists? I'm not saying it's okay to do this. I'm just saying I'm just curious who his target was, because it seems like he's very beloved. If you've got statues and T-shirts about you, just seems like there's a huge piece missing.
Mexico, the USA, India, El Salvador, and Spain. Notably
true,
absent
Julian.
from this list, however, is Ireland. There was a proposal passed by Galway City Council to erect a statue of Che Guevara in 2012. However, the plans fell through, likely due to political pressure by high-profile American politicians and academics, such as Ileana Rose Lehtinen of the US House of Representative Foreign Affairs Committee, or Professor Carlos Era of Yale University, who told the City Council that if they were to build a statue for Che Guevara, then they should also build one for Oliver Cromwell, a man known in Ireland as the Butcher due to his genocidal colonial war which wiped out more than 40% of the country's native population in the mid-1600s. A number of members of the Irish political and business elite also strongly opposed Che's statue being built, so it's unsurprising that Galway City Council caved in to the pressure. In spite of ruling class opposition, Che's importance here in Ireland remains immense. He visited the country in 1962 and 1965 and has since become a symbol of Irish republicanism due to his ancestry in Galway, his support for Irish national liberation, and his prominence as a symbol of revolution against...
Okay, you guys are killing me. With Papa, hi Michelle, with Papa Trudeau. No, I missed Fidel Castro. I was busy wandering my eyes. Papa Trudeau. That is, I'm going to have to make a meme to that. That is awesome.
Against imperialism in oppressed nations. Across the ocean in Argentina, in the television contest El Gen Argentino aired in 2007, Argentinian voters from the public decided on whom they considered to be the greatest people from their country. This was a spin-off from the BBC's 100 Greatest Britons. In this show, out of a sample of 350,000 public votes, Che Guevara placed as one of the top 10 finalists with a ranking of 5th place, demonstrating that Che still holds a special place in the hearts and minds of many people in the country of his birth and around the world. Che Guevara's conception of revolutionary theory, as mentioned earlier, came from a principled anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist standpoint. However, Guevara's own unique ideas surrounding the practice of revolution and guerrilla war certainly played a large role in his understanding of military tactics. Che believed, similarly to Mao in China, that a socialist revolution in the modern world could only be successfully won through armed struggle, and Che saw the guerrilla war as fundamental to this principle. Che emphasized the bond between guerrilla war and class struggle in his essay, Guerrilla War, a Method, in 1963, writing, "Is the guerrilla method the unique formula to conquer political power in all America? Or anyway, will it be the predominant formula? Or simply, will it be one more formula among others used to..."
Let's be really clear. I do not approve of anything that this guy has done, and I'm not saying that he's a hero. I'm looking at more from the lens of if I were to be in another country, would I like the United States coming in and meddling in our affairs all the time? That's the lens I'm looking at this through. I'm not saying that killing people and his guerrilla warfare style is like the means to go. I'm trying to understand how this all fits together, because under Operation Gladio, everyone is a communist before 1992. After then, it becomes fighting terror. So then there are terrorists, right? A terrorist organization, a terrorist group, which all of those groups with MI6, MI5, CIA, Mossad, and all the countries have their own secret organization. But along with these different organizations, have created and helped fund these terror groups that cause terror. And so anyway, so that's all I'm saying is like, I'm not saying, oh, this guy's a hero, but the people in his country loved him because he was fighting for them. He wanted them to have their freedom. And that's what made him good. His things he did was not. But what do you do? I don't know. I can't go to war, and I wouldn't want to go to war, and I wouldn't send my kid to war.
Fight. During these controversies, it's used to criticize those who want to adopt guerrilla war, saying that they forget the class struggles as if they were opposed. We refuse the concept inherent to this position. The guerrilla war is a people's war. It is a class struggle. If one intends to realize this kind of war without the support of the people, one will see the prelude of an inevitable disaster. The guerrilla is the people's combative.
I think that's the key. With the guerrilla, what he just said right there, it's the people's war. So guerrilla was the people's war. You can't have a guerrilla war if you don't have the backing of the people. So the people backed him. So that makes a lot of sense.
Vanguard, situated in a certain territory, armed, disposed to realize many warlike actions that drift to the unique strategic possible aim, the capture of power. It is supported by the peasant masses and workers of the region and of all territory. Without these premises, one cannot admit the guerrilla war. From this passage, it can be seen that Che understood the need to build up a powerful support base among oppressed classes of the people before waging any kind of guerrilla campaign. However, Che ultimately didn't quite reach the same level of analysis as the Maoist theory of the mass line, and fell just shy of understanding the semi-feudal economic system that existed in Latin America. Seemingly in contradiction to his own aforementioned warnings of the need for mass support bases, Che's own later attempts to assemble small bands of heroic guerrillas in order to spread the revolution from the starting point of an armed struggle unfortunately resulted in failure in all cases except Cuba. This was because the mass support base of the people had already begun development since 1953, and was then properly expanded and deepened by the 22 survivors of the Grandma's Landing from 1956. According to Che's theory, the guerrillas would act as a vanguard in and of themselves, inspiring the people through their actions and further creating the conditions for revolution. Che saw the expansion of the guerrilla war as following a so-called beehive effect with each successive development of a guerrilla base. In Che's concept of guerrilla war, once each guerrilla base was fully developed, a small band of guerrillas would leave this base and travel to another area to repeat the process. Che was correct in that the creation of guerrilla bases can become seeds for growth, new power, and political development. However, this strategy ultimately is unsustainable if the support base doesn't already exist in each new area from some kind of previous revolutionary activism to keep the small guerrilla bands alive and to nurture them. Such conditions existed in Cuba, where there was already mass support before the guerrillas moved in. but these conditions didn't exist at the time in Bolivia. This strategy, popularly coined as Focoismo, although not by Che himself, appears to carry with it this flaw. In spite of this, it inspired dozens of armed movements in Latin America, all with various degrees of success and failure. The strategy of Foco appears to stem more from Che's later practice than it does his own writings, as while Che's written conception of guerrilla war seems to place heavy emphasis on gaining a mass support base as a precondition for any kind of guerrilla war, Foco has been popularly practiced as a method of more or less skipping this stage of building support and instead beginning with a small band of armed guerrillas as Che had attempted in Bolivia. In contrast to Maoist writings, what appears to be more absent in Che's writing is an attention to the importance of building a broad united front and mass organizations to wage political struggle. While in Cuba, these kinds of organizations had already been built by revolutionaries in the forms of trade unions and students' organizations, such organizations hadn't yet been developed in Bolivia, nor were these foundations built in the many more Foco experiments across Latin America that would follow in the wake of Che's death. As a theory, Foco envisions the guerrillas becoming inspirations to push a country's population in the direction of revolution, as had happened with the attack on the Moncado barracks in Cuba in 1953. While Maoists understand the mass line as something that must be built in preparation for guerrilla war, Foco appears to consider the guerrilla campaign and the building of the mass line to be one and the same as a process. Whether responsibility for this...
I agree with you, Wim. I'm kind of struggling because I know, so Mao, he was put into place in the 60s. That's who he's talking about, right? During the color revolutions. I'll have to look that up. But if I'm understanding that correctly, the difference between those two is the Gladio soldiers were the ones who were organizing the color revolutions. So Gladio is pretty much stay behind units that you influence people to do a certain thing because they have a certain outcome in mind. So if he's trying to mimic Mao, he's going to fail because he had help from the United States. He here is trying to fight the United States. He's against imperialism or other countries coming into their country and infiltrating their political system and their economy. So yeah, so having a grasp on the culture could be, yeah, he doesn't. I don't know. He doesn't understand that there was other behind the scenes things going on, I think.
This can be placed on Che himself is debatable. As mentioned before, these strategies appear to stem more from Che's later life revolutionary attempts than from what he actually wrote. Just as Foco groups in the future would repeat the mistakes of Bolivia, such as the People's Revolutionary Army in Argentina, many groups claiming to follow Mao Zedong's theory of protracted people's war, such as the Araguaia guerrillas of Brazil, would also fall into the same trap of not properly building the mass support base among the people before initiating their campaign. Whichever theorist they drew inspiration from, these attempts to build a revolution from the small spark of a few guerrilla bands were certainly selfless and heroic, but ultimately adventurous in nature. Of course, this doesn't mean that guerrilla armies shouldn't or can't start small. The fighters of the Cuban Revolution, or the Maoist fighters today in the Filipino Revolution, both began as only a couple of squadrons. However, what set them apart from adventurist movements was the climate of mass support in which these were born. The very climate that both great Marxists, Che and Mao, warned sternly is absolutely necessary before revolutionaries embark on any kind of armed campaign to take political power. When Che Guevara's father claimed that his son's veins flowed with the blood of Irish rebels, he was absolutely correct in this description. There are very few people on an international scale who have been able to become the living embodiment of revolution and liberation that Che has. In the 19th century, the famous painting by Eugene Delacroix, Liberty Leading the People, was the defining image of revolution. For many, the first picture that came to mind whenever the word was mentioned. Perhaps in France and other countries, it still is.
Okay, so this is where I guess I finally figured out where I'm struggling, because people keep using the word Marxist. They keep calling him a Marxist, right? But capitalism is not part of Marxism, and they strongly tout, or that have they been saying that they're against capitalism? They're not. I don't really get the impression that that's what they're saying. So a Marxist, let's go by the true definition, is someone who strongly agrees with the political, economic, and philosophical ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. If you're a Marxist, you're especially critical of capitalism. Yes. So they were saying before that they want capitalism. They just don't want other countries coming in and determining their economic success. So he's been labeled a Marxist, even by Webster's dictionary. He's not against that. He's not against capitalism and free markets for his country. He's against other countries coming in and taking up their land and their resources and controlling them. That's just what I'm getting from this.
However, it's undeniable that today and in the latter part of the 20th century, the first image that comes to mind when the word revolution is heard is the beret-wearing, cigar-smoking image of Che Guevara. Despite the mistakes of Foucault, Che's theory and understanding of the need for guerrilla war as a method for oppressed peoples to seize power was solid, and his military writings still hold value for revolutionaries today.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused, Mild. And I think my confusion, okay, we still have one more to watch. And I think my confusion is because I've watched 3 today. So I'm battling 2 different ideas in my head is my point. And so, yeah, so I'm just thinking out loud. So what I'm thinking out loud doesn't mean I'm right. This is where my head goes when I'm breaking down. And if I wasn't watching it with you, my head would still go through these things and I would look up definitions because I want to understand. And I'm hoping that you guys like to understand too. I'm assuming you are because you're here. You're watching with me and I appreciate you. Oh, by the way, guys, if you are in here, if you are on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up button. I appreciate you chatting. If you guys are the heart or the like. If you guys are on Rumble, that's where you hit the thumbs up box or thumbs up. And share off platform. You guys are awesome.
Genius commander, a martyr, and an icon. It's no wonder that Che Guevara commands respect in every corner of the world, not just among revolutionaries, but in the public eye as a whole. Right, thanks very much for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful in one way.
Okay, so I'm not trying to confuse y'all. So we listened to 2 different documentaries, and I guess I missed it mild that he denounces capitalism. I thought he was denouncing imperialism. So maybe I missed that. I'll have to rewatch it again tomorrow. All right, so we have one more, and I stumbled upon this one today, and after I listened to it, I'm like, oh, let's kind of get some different narratives and kind of let's contrast and see. So the next one that we have is a speech that he gave. And I can't remember what year it was in. It'll tell us. Yeah, that's what I understand what you're saying, Mild. And I just know that the United States does go into other countries and does infiltrate their politics, right? They set up leaders that they want, and then they buy up land, they set up factories. That's imperialism. So I just get confused. And you're 100% correct. And I think sometimes they do, yes, like you said, they use the word incorrectly to promote totalitarianism. Yes. But I just have a hard time thinking that he's a totalitarian if he's out there giving medical aid. He's out there setting up programs to help children become educated and to read. Just seems like that. If you're a totalitarian, you do not want your subjects to be learned because you want them to be obedient. So you kind of want them to be simple. And that's just my interpretation. Doesn't mean it's correct. That's just how I see it. All right. So the next one, which I think this is the awesomest thing that's come to pass. Oh crap! What did I just do? I did something. Hold on.
Dr. Ernesto Guevara Lynch, better
Why
known
are
as
you being
Che Guevara.
dumb? Sorry, this isn't pausing. Okay, so this is a new thing that I've come across a couple of times. Gosh, pause. Is AI translating speeches into English. So let's listen to this. So these are his words translated from a speech. And then at the end, let's decide. So we've got 3 different narratives, 3 different positions. I gotta go close the door. Someone's loud.
Del campo socialista encabezado por la Unión Soviética. 21 years have already elapsed since the end of the last world conflagration. Numerous publications in every possible language celebrate this event symbolized by the defeat of Japan. There is a climate of apparent optimism in.
Do you guys want me to see if I can get closed captioning on this? Would that help? Let me see if I thought it was on already. Okay. I just turned closed captioning on for this video. Let's see if that helps.
In many areas of the different camps into which the world is divided. 21 years without a world war, in these times of maximum confrontations, of violent clashes and sudden changes, appears to be a very high figure. However, without analyzing the practical results of this peace, for which all of us have stated that we are willing to fight, we would do well to inquire if this peace is real. It is not the purpose of these notes to detail the different conflicts of a local character that have been occurring since the surrender of Japan. Neither do we intend to recount the numerous and increasing instances of civilian strife which have taken place during these years of apparent peace. It will be enough just to name, as an example against undue optimism, the wars of Korea and Vietnam. In the first one, after years of savage warfare, the northern part of the country was submerged in the most terrible devastation known in the annals of modern warfare. Riddled with bombs, without factories, schools, or hospitals, with absolutely no shelter for housing 10 million inhabitants. Under the discredited flag of the United Nations, dozens of countries under the military leadership of the United States participated in this war with a massive intervention of U.S. soldiers and the use as cannon fodder of the South Korean population that was enrolled. On the other side, the army and the people of Korea and the volunteers from the People's Republic of China were furnished with supplies and advised by the Soviet military apparatus. The U.S. tested all sorts of weapons of destruction, excluding the thermonuclear type, but including on a limited scale bacteriological and chemical warfare. In Vietnam, the patriotic forces of that country have carried on an almost uninterrupted war against 3 imperialist powers: Japan, whose might suffered an almost vertical collapse after the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki; France, who recovered from that defeated country its Indochina colonies and ignored the promises it had made in harder times; and the United States in this last phase of the struggle. There were limited confrontations in every continent, although in our America for a long time there were only incipient liberation struggles and military coups d'etat until the Cuban Revolution resounded the alert.
Okay, so right there, he's saying that in Vietnam, he brought in, so the United States was fighting three different countries, and they used different kinds of weapons, everything excluding nuclear, Agent Orange, biological warfare, and other providing weapons to the different people. And I do know that the United States did provide weapons to both sides of that war. We had no business being there. What was I going to say just now? Dang it. Oh, and that until the revolution in Cuba, the United States performed coup d'etat after coup d'etat in all kinds of different countries. I want to know what year this speech was. This is in 1967. Wow.
Signaling the importance of this region. This action attracted the wrath of the imperialists, and Cuba was finally obliged to defend its coasts, first in Playa Girón and again during the missile crisis. This last incident could have unleashed a war of incalculable proportions if a US-Soviet clash had occurred over the Cuban question. But evidently the focal point of all contradictions is at present the territory of the peninsula of Indochina and the adjacent areas. Laos and Vietnam are torn by a civil war which has ceased being such by the entry into the conflict of US imperialism with all its might, thus transforming the whole zone into a dangerous detonator.
Okay, so in Vietnam, during the Civil War, the United States was supplying weapons to both sides of this war. And I have a whole list of notes on this. I need to pull them up. I was trying to remember what the resource was that they wanted from there.
Ready at any moment to explode. In Vietnam, the confrontation has assumed extremely acute characteristics. It is not our intention either to chronicle this war. We shall simply remember and point out some milestones. In 1954, after the annihilating defeat of Dien Bien Phu, an agreement was signed at Geneva dividing the country into two separate zones. Elections were to be held within a term of 18 months to determine who should govern Vietnam and how the country should be reunified. The US did not sign this document and started maneuvering to substitute the Emperor Bao Dai, who was a French puppet, for a man more amiable to its purposes.
Okay, so they wanted to split it into two places. The United States didn't sign this treaty because they wanted to have someone else put into place.
This happened to be Ngo Dinh Diem, whose tragic end, that of an orange squeezed dry by imperialism, is well known by all. During the months following the agreement, optimism reigned supreme in the camp of the popular forces. The last pockets of the anti-French resistance were dismantled in the south of the country, and they awaited the fulfillment of the Geneva agreements. But the patriots soon realized there would be no elections unless the United States felt itself capable of imposing its will in the polls, which was practically impossible, even resorting to all its fraudulent methods. Once again, the fighting broke out in the South and gradually acquired full intensity. At present, the U.S. Army has increased to over 500,000 invaders, while the puppet forces decrease in number and, above all, have totally lost their combativeness. Almost 2 years ago, the United States started bombing systematically the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in yet another attempt to overcome the belligerence of the South and impose, from a position of strength, a meeting at the conference table. At first, the bombardments were more or less isolated occurrences and were adorned with the mask of reprisals for alleged provocations from the North. Later on, as they increased in intensity and regularity, they became one gigantic attack carried out by the Air Force of the United States, day after day, for the purpose of destroying all vestiges of civilization in the northern zone of the country. This is an episode of the infamously notorious escalation. The material aspirations of the Yankee world have been fulfilled to a great extent, regardless of the unflinching defense of the Vietnamese anti-aircraft artillery, of the numerous planes shot down, and of the socialist countries' aid in war supplies, there is a sad reality. Vietnam, a nation representing the aspirations, the hopes of a whole world of forgotten peoples, is tragically alone. This nation must endure the furious attacks of U.S. technology with practically no possibility of reprisals in the South, and only some of defense in the North, but always alone. The solidarity of all progressive forces of the world towards the people of Vietnam today is similar to the bitter irony of the plebeians coaxing on the gladiators in the Roman arena. It is not a matter.
So that is what I was telling you guys at the first of the first, during the first documentary that we watched. Is so right now he's considered a leftist, right? We have to remember that our parties have kind of flip-flopped. Well, there's pretty much a uniparty. So he's complaining about progressive people, right? He's being labeled a leftist. Leftists in this era are progressive. So he that's what he's having an issue with the expansionism about socialism. Yes, I don't like you're saying that he's Marxist and he's for socialism. I don't think he is. What I'm saying is, whenever there's a documentary out, it's through the narrative or the lens or the perception of the person doing it or talking about it. Like right now, I'll tell you right now, I have biases, and I try really hard. Hi, neurodivergent. I have my biases. I see things on a global scale, and I see things through Operation Gladio, where the government meddles and everything. I see everything that through them wanting a one world government, knowing that it didn't just start during World War II. It started in the 1800s and long before then, but just their documents and stuff came out in the 1800s. I don't think you think he's for socialism. You think so you're saying that he wants the government to rule the people and to control everything that the people do? Or am I misunderstanding what socialism is?
Matter of wishing success to the victim of aggression, but of sharing his fate. One must accompany him to his death or to victory. When we analyze the lonely situation of the Vietnamese people, we are overcome by anguish at this illogical moment of humanity. U.S. imperialism is guilty of aggression. Its crimes are enormous and cover the whole world. We already know all that, gentlemen. But this guilt also applies to those who, when the time came for a definition, hesitated to make Vietnam an inviolable part of the socialist world, running, of course, the risks of a war on a global scale, but also forcing a decision upon imperialism. And the guilt also applies to those who maintain a war of abuse and snares, started quite some time ago by the representatives of the two greatest powers of the socialist camp. We must ask ourselves, seeking an honest answer, is Vietnam isolated or is it not? Is it not maintaining a dangerous equilibrium between the two quarreling powers? And what great people these are. What stoicism and courage. And what a lesson for the world is contained in this struggle. Not for a long time shall we be able to know if President Johnson ever seriously thought of bringing about some of the reforms needed by his people to iron out the barbed class contradictions that grow each day with explosive power. The truth is that the improvements announced under the pompous title of the Great Society have dropped into the cesspool of Vietnam. The largest of all imperialist powers feels in its own guts the bleeding inflicted by a poor and underdeveloped.
Hold on, I'm gonna rewind 10 seconds because I missed some of this by reading Mild's chat. So I'm gonna copy and paste it. I love it when you guys give me these thoughts. He was a purist when it comes to Marxism. His critics of the USSR and China got him in a lot of trouble. Yeah, that's what confuses me, because I thought he wasn't against capitalism. I thought he was against imperialism, and I think those are two completely different things. But that's why I'm saying I am confused, not saying that I just got to make it make sense. And I'm not saying you're wrong or your definition is wrong or that you're misunderstanding. I'm saying I'm confused. Hi, Rob Mill. Oh, yay. Go see Good Logic. Get caught up on him. All right. So Mild is saying, supporter to the socialists, they view it as taking the government/business from the tyrant capitalist and giving it to the people. The problem is that the people always need an iron fist leader. Well, that's where I'm confused, Mild, because I understood it as from these two things, and I'm not saying I'm right, is that what he was saying is he was wanting to kick other countries, so use imperialism. At the very first of the speech, he was talking about imperialism, other countries going in, placing leaders in roles, so political, so they infiltrate their political system, and then they influence everything economically. From what I understood, that's what he was against, not necessarily against capitalism. Did he say that he's socialist? I'm going to keep listening, but I got to rewind so I'm at 10:17. I want to go back to 10 because I was reading and trying to understand Mild's message, because I'm ADD. I can't do both. And I didn't want to miss what he was saying. And yes, I've listened to this twice today also. So I've been listening to this stuff all day. However, it's like trying to zone into every word and trying to understand.
The truth is that the improvements announced under the pompous title of the Great Society have dropped into the cesspool of Vietnam. The largest of all imperialist powers feels in its own guts the bleeding inflicted by a poor and underdeveloped country. Its fabulous economy feels the strain of the war effort. Murder is ceasing to be the most convenient business for its monopolies.
So, Mild, does he say in here that he blames capitalism for imperialism? Did I miss that somewhere? Because I don't ever remember him saying that. Or is that based off of other information? Well, remember that capitalism is octopus. See, yes. But that he did say that. But that's when I was saying that if you think of, well, I think this is my interpretation of it, and I'm not saying I'm right. So I think of an octopus. I'm thinking of the United States having one arm in Argentina, one arm in Brazil. They have an arm in Thailand. They have an arm in because he said the imperialism capitalists is what I could have swore he said. And they have their fingers in every single place, right? That's from what I understood it. And I'm not saying I'm right, but that's so, yeah, I'll have to go back and re-listen. Yes, he calls that capitalism, but that's not capitalism. What he is saying is he's against imperialism, not necessarily capitalism, if you go by the true definition.
Defensive weapons and never inadequate number is all these extraordinary soldiers have. Besides love for their homeland, their society, and unsurpassed courage. But imperialism is bogging down in Vietnam, is unable to find a way out, and desperately seeks one that will overcome with dignity this dangerous situation in which it now finds itself.
Okay, so he's saying imperialism right there. I'm paying attention. I'm not saying you're wrong, Mild. I'm taking everything you're saying and I'm taking everything in.
Furthermore, the 4 points put forward by the North and the 5 points of the South now corner imperialism, making the confrontation even more decisive. Everything indicates that peace, this unstable peace, which bears that name for the sole reason that no worldwide conflagration has taken place, is again in danger of being destroyed by some irrevocable and unacceptable step taken by the United States. What role shall we, the exploited people of the world, play? The peoples of the 3 continents focus their attention on Vietnam and learn their lesson. Since imperialists blackmail humanity by threatening it with war, the wise reaction is not to fear war. The general tactics of the people should be to launch a constant and a firm attack in all fronts where the confrontation is taking place.
Makes me wonder how it goes. Okay. Yeah, capitalism is imperialism to him. That's what I'm saying. And to me, they're 2 separate things. Yes, but that's what the guy said in a communist economy under Mao. Yeah, he said that. But that's what confuses me, is that I wonder if he understands what it is. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you. But his actions just appear differently. Because I'm definitely against communism, 100%. Makes me wonder how it got probably poorly as it makes me wonder how it would go probably poorly as it's involving people. Well, there's not. Yeah, but communism isn't the only opposite route. I don't know. Let's just keep listening. I'm just paying attention because he's definitely against imperialism. He's against these elitists. Let's just call it the global elites, guys. I'm against communism and Marxism. I'm 100% against that stuff. So based off of my research, and this is where I get conflicted, is based off of my research. There's a lot of countries that have been labeled communist and Marxist because the United States wanted an excuse and a reason to have to go to war. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but a lot of the times it's been the case, and a way to be able to overthrow different governments and to perform coups d'etats. So when he's saying that he likes these different leaders, is he saying he's living during this time? Like he's there. Is he seeing them as Marxists and communists? It's kind of hard to say. I wish I can go back, because I'm gonna have to find some journals and some other writings. China is communist and capitalist. They're a social capitalists, or what's that called?
In those places where this meager peace we have has been violated, which is our duty, to liberate ourselves at any price. The world panorama is of great complexity. The struggle for liberation has not yet been undertaken by some countries of ancient Europe, sufficiently developed to realize the contradictions of capitalism, but weak to such a degree that they are unable either to follow imperialism or even to start on its own road. Their contradictions will reach an explosive stage during the forthcoming years. But their problems, and consequently their own solutions, are different from those of our dependent and economically underdeveloped countries.
I just want to say hi to all our new chatters. We have Jay Shipes. We have Macklin Griffin. LW's back. That must mean that trivia night's over. Welcome, everybody. Johnny. Who else? Is that everybody that just barely joined? Vandy, Jay, Macklin. Fools were, oh my gosh. Traveling Fools rated us. Thank you so much. I was like, these are all the trivia night people. Also, Mild, I am appreciating everything that you're adding, and Julian, I'm thinking through things, and it's not. I want you guys to think I'm not trying to persuade you to think a different way. It's just information that's coming in full fledged, if that makes sense. And I think out loud, and I'm not saying I'm right, and that's why I'm saying that's what I'm doing. And was it the leftists wearing them, or was it someone else?
The fundamental field of imperialist exploitation comprises the three underdeveloped continents, America, Asia, and Africa. Every country has also its own characteristics, but each continent as a whole also presents a certain unity. Our America is integrated by a group of more or less homogeneous countries, and in most parts of its territory, U.S. monopolist capitals maintain an absolute supremacy. Puppet governments, or in the best of cases, weak and fearful local rulers, are incapable of.
So this is where I agree with him. Puppet governments are not good, right? You know, we have a puppet leader. Puppet governments that are not representing the people are no bueno. And that's just how I see it. So I love the United States, and I want it to go back to the way it was. And I watch these videos because I want to try to understand what they've done in the past by installing different leaders so that we can prepare, because we cannot take any more of this.
Contradicting orders from their Yankee master. The United States has nearly reached the climax of its political and economic domination.
Nah.
It could hardly advance much more. Any change in the situation could bring about a setback. Their policy is to maintain that which has already been conquered. The line of action at the present time is limited to the brutal use of force with the purpose of thwarting the liberation movements, no matter of what type they might happen to be. The slogan, "We will not allow another Cuba," hides the possibility of perpetrating aggressions without fear of reprisal, such as the one carried out against the Dominican Republic, or before that, the massacre in Panama, and the clear warning stating that Yankee troops are ready to intervene anywhere in America where the ruling regime may be altered, thus endangering their.
Yeah, Kari, you're seeing it through the way I'm seeing it. He's imperialist empire. He's what he's saying right now is he's against a global government. That's what I'm understanding from him, which, if that's the case, according to the United States, hi, traveling fools, then he is persona non grata, right? Because that's what they've been trying to establish forever. Way, 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 way before the 1900s.
Interests. This policy enjoys an almost absolute impunity. The OS is a suitable mask in spite of its unpopularity. The inefficiency of the UN is ridiculous as well as tragic. The armies of all American countries are ready to intervene in order to smash their peoples. The International of Crime and Treason has in fact been organized. On the other hand, the autochthonous bourgeoisie have lost all their capacity to oppose imperialism, if they ever had it, and they have become the last card in the pack.
So this is where he's wrong, because the bourgeoisie, right? Those are the... Never mind. I was thinking of Bolsheviks. Never mind. Bourgeoisie and Bolsheviks confuse me. They don't, but that's what I was thinking of.
There are no other alternatives, either a socialist revolution or a make-believe revolution. Our America is integrated by a group of more or less homogeneous countries, and in most parts of its territory, U.S. monopolist capitals maintain an absolute supremacy. Puppet governments, or in the best of cases, weak and fearful local rulers, are incapable of contradicting orders from their Yankee master. The United States has nearly reached the climax of its political and economic domination. It could hardly advance much more. Any change in the situation could bring about a setback. Their policy is to maintain that which has already been conquered. The line of action at the present time is limited to the brutal use of force with the purpose of thwarting the liberation movements. No matter.
Okay, so yes, so I wondered what if there was a difference between revolutionary socialism and just socialism. And so revolutionary socialism is a political philosophy, doctrine, and tradition within socialism that stresses the idea that a social revolution is necessary to bring about structural changes in society. More specifically, it is a view that revolution is necessary precondition for transitioning from a capitalist to a social mode of production. Revolution is not necessarily defined as a violent insurrection. It is defined as a seizure of political power by mass movement of the working class so that the state is directly controlled or abolished. So that the state is directly controlled or abolished, that's key, by the working class as opposed to the capitalist class and its interests. Interesting. So, okay, it's not necessarily defined as a violent insurrection. It is defined as a seizure of political power by mass movements of the working class. So like me and you who are tired of this government, I'm trying to relate it to this time, so that the state is directly controlled or abolished. So you control it or you abolish it. As opposed to capitalist class and its interests. It almost seems like the definitions have changed, right? Because definitions and things have changed through time. And I'm not saying it's the case. But so is he saying that because it's almost like he's saying that the capitalists are the elites and he wants to abolish the elites. Does that mean that he wants to install, like, be in control and lead everybody? Or does he just want to free the people and then do something like what the United States has? I don't know. It's kind of confusing. Thank you, Bobby Peru. New sub from TF. Thank you so much. Anyway, these are my thoughts. These are not true. I'm trying to dissect things. I don't have a desired outcome.
Of what type they might happen to be. The slogan, "We will not allow another Cuba," hides the possibility of perpetrating aggressions without fear of reprisal, such as the one carried out against the Dominican Republic, or before that, the massacre in Panama, and the clear warning stating that Yankee troops are ready to intervene anywhere in America where the ruling regime may be altered, thus endangering their interests.
Yes, so their version of abolishing the state is replacing it with a mob-controlled commune where disagreement with the majority is not tolerated. I understand that that's the definition and that's the goal. I'm trying to see it through this person's eyes, through two different documentaries and through his words. And I'm trying to pay attention really closely to what he's saying to see if it matches up, because he's revered, he's loved by a lot of people. And if he was wanting to take charge and take control of everyone, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to me. But doesn't mean, some people really loved Hitler, so I don't know.
This policy enjoys an almost absolute impunity. The OS is a suitable mask in spite of its unpopularity. The inefficiency of the UN is ridiculous as well as tragic. The armies of all American countries are ready to intervene in order to smash their peoples. The International of Crime and Treason has in fact been...
What he was just describing right there was UN soldiers and Gladio soldiers, right there. So what Gladio is a bunch of left behind soldiers in every single country, and they are trained by the different secret governments. So the Mossad, MI6, MI5, CIA. So they're trained to do covert operations, everything from explosives to terrorism, assassinations, or to do propaganda campaigns. So that's all the things that they're supposed to do. And they're private. So people don't know who they are. They have normal everyday lives until they're called up for action. So that's kind of what he's explaining right there, in case you guys were wondering.
Been organized. On the other hand, the autochthonous bourgeoisie have lost all their capacity to oppose imperialism, if they ever had it, and they have become the last card in the pack. There are no other alternatives, either a socialist revolution or a make-believe revolution. Asia is a continent with many different characteristics. The struggle for liberation, waged against a series of European colonial powers, resulted in the establishment of more or less progressive governments whose ulterior evolution have brought about, in some cases, the deepening of the primary objectives of national liberation, and in others, a setback towards the adoption of pro-imperialist positions. From the economic point of view, the United States had very little to lose and much to gain from Asia. These changes benefited its interests. The struggle for the overthrow of other neo-colonial powers and the penetration of new spheres of action in the economic field is carried out sometimes directly, occasionally through Japan. But there are special political conditions, particularly in Indochina, which create in Asia certain characteristics of capital importance and play a decisive role in the entire U.S. military strategy. The imperialists encircle China through South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, South Vietnam, and Thailand at least. This dual situation, a strategic interest as important as the military encirclement of the People's Republic of China and the penetration of these great markets, which they do not dominate yet, turns Asia into one of the most explosive points of the world today, in spite of its apparent stability outside of the Vietnamese war zone. The Middle East, though it geographically belongs to this continent, has its own contradictions and is actively in ferment. It is impossible to foretell how far this Cold War between Israel, backed by the imperialists, and the progressive countries of that zone will go.
It's almost as though, sorry, it's hot in this room tonight. We had a warm day today in this room. I'm used to it being freezing cold, and it's hot for once. It's almost like you could take the word imperialist and replace it with the word globalist. Everything he's describing is globalist. And maybe you can let me know if I'm wrong or if I'm missing the mark there. Sorry, I was looking something out. So I was looking up a word because I need to, when there's words or organizations I don't understand, I look them up, because if you don't understand them, you can't understand the whole. So I was actually looking up OS, right? So the Office of Internal Oversight Services, so OIOS, is the internal oversight body of the United Nations. So he's saying that they have failed. Well, they were set up by a certain group of people, so that's why they failed them. Anyway. Yes, globalist is a newer term. And he called them imperialists, and we call them globalists. So I'm thinking that he's talking about globalists. Tinfoil hat looking... Yes, I'm looking up words. I don't claim to know everything, guys. I'm learning with you because I like to learn. And sometimes these documentaries can be boring, so I'm trying to make them fun.
This is just another one of the volcanoes threatening eruption in the world today. Africa offers an almost virgin territory to the neo-colonial invasion. There have been changes.
I love it when neo-colonial invasion. So Africa is vulnerable to the neo-colonial invasion. I need a horse and buggy too, Mrs. Mack. I want to go live in Pennsylvania with the Amish. Honestly, I'm to that point in my life.
Which, to some extent, forced neocolonial powers to give up their former absolute prerogatives. But when these changes are carried out uninterruptedly, colonialism continues in the form of neocolonialism, with similar effects as far as the economic situation is concerned. The United States had no colonies in this region, but is now struggling to penetrate its partners' fiefs. It can be said that following the strategic plans of U.S. imperialism, Africa constitutes its long-range reservoir. Its present investments, though, are only important in the Union of South Africa, and its penetration is beginning to be felt in the Congo, Nigeria, and other.
So he's really talking about. I don't know if he's a I don't know if he's a communism or wants communist or Marxist rule. It seems like he wants liberation for his country from these globalists that have come into his country. And of course, I had to look up neocolonialism. It's what I thought it was. So neocolonialism is the continuation of or reimposition of imperialist rule, so for other countries, by a state, usually a former colonial power. So say Britain being in Africa or in Palestine, right? Over another nominally independent state, usually a former colony. This is the continuation of colonial representation and realities which remain after formal colonialism has come to an end. So it's just like, was it in Iran or was it in Syria? Gosh, I'm trying to remember what country it was in, where the United States was occupying the country. Gosh dang it, was it Iran? Oh, I'm mad because I know it, and I was just listening to an X Spaces they were talking about it the other night. Anyway, the country was occupied by the United States, and they wanted to have a different. So they elected a ruler. You know what? I think it was Africa. So they had elected their own leader, and through their own elections. So it wasn't something that was implanted. And this leader did not want the United States in their country anymore. So they told them that they would have to leave. And what happened is the United States says, well, you can rule your country, but we are going to create a perimeter, which I was talking about this earlier. We're going to set up a perimeter around these resources. So you can have your country, but you can't have access to the uranium. I swear it's Africa. I'm trying to think which country, but you can have access to this uranium. You can have access to these resources. So they are still exporting all these resources. And then, so they're going to go and attack, and the leader ends up getting taken out. Okay. Did you see how this is kind of going? 32 likes. Everyone, give me likes. Please, please, please. You're awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
Other countries where a violent rivalry with other imperialist powers is beginning to take place. So far, it does not have their great interest to defend except its pretended right to intervene in every spot of the world where its monopolies detect huge profits or the existence of large reserves of raw materials.
Yep.
All this past history justifies our concern regarding the possibilities of liberating the peoples within a long or a short period of time. In Vietnam, the patriotic forces of that country have carried on an almost uninterrupted war against three imperialist powers: Japan, whose might suffered an almost vertical collapse after the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki; France, who recovered from that defeated country its Indochina colonies and ignored the promises it had made in harder times; and the United States in this last phase of the struggle, There were limited confrontations in every continent, although in our America for a long time there were only incipient liberation struggles and military coups d'etat until the Cuban Revolution resounded the alert, signaling the importance of this region. This action attracted the wrath of the imperialists, and Cuba was finally obliged to defend its coasts, first in Playa Girón and again during the missile crisis. This last incident could have unleashed a war of incalculable proportions if a U.S.-Soviet clash had occurred over the Cuban question. But evidently the focal point of all contradictions is at present the territory of the peninsula of Indochina and the adjacent areas. Laos and Vietnam are torn by a civil war which has ceased being such by the entry into the conflict of U.S. imperialism with all its might, thus transforming the whole.
You have to remember that JFK did not want to go to war in Vietnam. And he did not want to be, he wanted to pull out all forces out of Cuba. There were things that JFK knew, and that's why he is no longer here. He wanted to abolish the CIA. He was against this going into other countries and taking their resources. The people that benefited from that and those resources and the money that came from them did not want that to come to an end. Right? End of democracy. I don't feel like I know that everyone says that Che was for ending democracy. I don't think he was. I think he was against globalism. And the narrative is that he was a Marxist communist. And during that time period, we know that especially in South America, because he even said in that book, there was very few countries that were communist. Argentina definitely wasn't one of them until they tried to install a different leader.
Whole zone into a dangerous detonator, ready at any moment to explode. In Vietnam, the confrontation has assumed extremely acute characteristics. It is not our intention either to chronicle this war. We shall simply remember and point out some milestones. The social and political evolution of Africa does not lead us to expect a continental revolution. The liberation struggle against the...
So multi-super Khalil. So you're asking here, I'll put your chat up here so everyone can read it. So you're asking, is the African country March 1724, Niger has suspended its military agreement with the United States with immediate effect. Are you saying Niger has suspended its military agreement with the United States? Yes. There are countries that are standing up for themselves. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to Niger and see if there is not a replacement of that leader in the next 6 months to a year. He did want to end democracy. I have a hard time believing it.
Portuguese should end victoriously, but Portugal does not mean anything in the imperialist field. The confrontations of revolutionary importance are those which place at bay all the imperialist apparatus. This does not mean, however, that we should stop fighting for the liberation of the 3 Portuguese colonies and for the deepening of their revolutions. When the black masses of South Africa or Rhodesia start their authentic revolutionary struggle, a new era will dawn in Africa. Or when the impoverished masses of a nation rise up to rescue their right to a decent life from the hands of the ruling oligarchies. Up to now, army putsches follow one another. A group of officers succeeds another, or substitute a ruler who no longer serves their caste interests or those of the powers who covertly manage him. But there are no great popular upheavals. In the Congo, these characteristics appeared briefly generated by the memory of Lumumba, but they have been losing strength in the last few months. In Asia, as we have seen, the situation is explosive. The points of friction are not only Vietnam and Laos, where there is fighting. Such a point is also Cambodia, where at any time a direct U.S. aggression may start, Thailand, Malaya, and of course Indonesia, where we cannot assume that the last word has been said, regardless of the annihilation.
You have to remember how many hundreds of thousands of people that Kissinger killed. Kissinger, I don't know if I can say that word on here. Kissinger killed a lot of people.
Of the Communist Party in that country when the reactionaries took over. And also, naturally, the Middle East. In Latin America, the armed...
You say, let's talk about oligarchy? Yes, well, he's talking about imperialism, which is pretty much oligarchy. The businesses own everything. And who owns all the businesses?
Struggle is going on in Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, and Bolivia. The first uprisings are cropping up in Brazil. There are also some resistance focuses which appear and then are extinguished. But all...
So Traveling Fools did his trivia night, so he missed the first two documentaries. So the first one that we listened to tonight was Forgotten History. It was a 13-minute one from American perspective. And then we listened to another documentary, and I forgot his name. It was 30 minutes long, and that was from the perspective of an Irishman. And now these are actually his words from a speech that are translated 6 months before he died. And yes, I know that the history books say that his views were based on Marxism and Leninism, so total socialist. I know that that's what Wikipedia says. I know that that's what history says. After covering the fall of the Cabal and Operation Gladio, World War I, World War II, I'm just, people get labeled certain things to justify eliminating them, right? That way they can say it. So I'm listening to his own, that's his own words. I know, but I'm saying the definitions, Julian, I hear you. I hear you very clearly. I hear everyone. I'm saying that his definitions and the way that the words that he's using in the context that he is using them in are not, they're not jiving, right? That's all I'm saying.
Almost all the countries of this continent are ripe for a type of struggle that, in order to achieve victory, cannot be content with anything less than establishing a government of socialist tendencies. In this...
So socialist tendencies, okay? A government with socialist tendencies doesn't mean I full-fledged want to be socialist. It's just saying socialist tendencies. This is the way I'm taking it. Not saying you have to. Socialist tendencies meaning we do not want these globalists, imperialist people into the country. A socialist revolution in America earlier in the speech. I know he said that, but I also read the definition of socialism, and it's pretty much a revolution. From my understanding, it could be either or. Socialist revolution is either the people, the populist, the main populist, overthrowing their government, either peacefully or forcibly, right? And what was the rest of it? Peacefully or forcibly. It doesn't mean afterwards that they have to install a socialist country. Correct, but socialism revolution is not the same as socialism. Socialist revolution is the populist of the people coming together and overthrowing the government. Or do I not understand definitions? That's very possible.
This continent, practically only one tongue is spoken. There is also such a great similarity between the classes in these countries that they have attained identification among themselves of an international Americano type, much more complete than in the other continents. language, habits, religion, a common foreign master unite them. The degree and the form of exploitation are similar for both the exploiters and the men they exploit in the majority of the countries of our America, and rebellion is ripening swiftly in it. We may ask ourselves, how shall this rebellion flourish? What type will it be? We have maintained for quite some time now that owing to the similarity of their characteristics, the struggle in our America will achieve in due course continental proportions. It shall be the scene of many great battles fought for the liberation of humanity. Within the frame of this struggle of continental scale, the battles which are now taking place are...
Okay, so I've got another definition, and I'm bringing them up, and it's not saying I'm right. I want, you guys are making me question a lot of things, and I really appreciate it. Like, so here's a definition of socialist revolutionaries. So I'm going to quit saying the word so. The socialist revolutionaries reject the dictatorship of the proletariat and advocate a government controlled by both the working classes and the intellectuals. Their law of socialization of the land had won them a great amount of support with the peasantry, and they also had support among the workers of the cities. So more sounds like it's like of the people, more like a republic. I must be misunderstanding this. The socialist revolutionaries reject the dictatorship of the proletariat and advocate a government controlled by the working classes and the intellectuals. Interesting. And the socialists took over. Yeah, socialism is not good. I am not for socialism. Don't ever think that I am. I am for capitalists, and I'm for a republic. Just make that very clear. So that's why it gets confusing, because yeah, but who's controlling the people though, Julian? So collectively they rule. So the working class and the anyway.
Are only episodes, but they have already furnished their martyrs, writing, they shall figure in the history of our America as having given their necessary blood in this last stage of the...
Yes, Eric. So yeah, this is confusing on purpose. And I'm understanding what socialism in Marcus theory is. I understand all that. I guess I understood from what definitions I've read on it is the socialist revolution wasn't necessarily installing a socialist government, but just them working together to overthrow their current government, either peacefully or forcibly. I would think of it as like a convention of the states where we, the people, the populist, decide to hold a convention of the states because our government has failed. And then we put another government in place. It doesn't mean it has to be socialist or communist. Well, the war leaders of the Color Revolution were CIA Operation Gladio operatives. That's why I'm saying it's confusing when you go by those things, because it's not what it's not that the history we've been taught is not the history that is.
The fight for the total freedom of man. These names will include Comandante Turcios Lima, Padre Camilo Torre, Comandante Fabricio Ojeda, Comandantes Lobaton, and Luis de la Puente Ucheda, all outstanding figures in the revolutionary movements of Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, and Peru. But the active movement of the people creates its new leaders. Cesar Montes and Yon Sosa raise up their flag in Guatemala, Fabio Vasquez and Marulanda in Colombia, Douglas Bravo in the western part of the country, and Americo Martin in El Bachelor, both directing their respective Venezuelan fronts. New uprisings shall take place in these and other countries of our America, as it has already happened in Bolivia, and they shall continue to grow in the midst of all the hardships inherent to this dangerous profession of being modern revolutionary. Many shall perish, victims of their errors. Others shall fall in the touch battle that approaches. New fighters and new leaders shall appear in the warmth of the revolutionary struggle.
I think that part of the confusion is for him and for a lot of people, they associate the United States with imperialism because they are the ones that are most recognized for intervening in other countries and placing, they're not necessarily in the fight themselves, but they supply weapons to both sides. They create chaos and conflict where there's mineral-rich resources in the country, and then the United States goes in and takes those resources. So when he's saying American imperialism, he's talking about the globalists that are part of the America, but it's not. It's not America. They're just in there. They're in this faction of the United States. Well, yeah, the United States has acted as an imperialist country. For sure they have. They for sure have put themselves in positions where they go in and rob other countries. It's not supposed to be that way. It's not at all supposed to be that way, but it's the way it has turned out to be.
Struggle. The people shall create their warriors and leaders in the selective framework of the war itself, and Yankee agents of repression shall increase. Today, there are military aids in all the countries where armed struggle is growing. The Peruvian army apparently carried out a successful action against the revolutionaries in that country. An army also trained and advised by the Yankees. But if the focuses of war grow with sufficient political and military insight, they shall become practically invincible and shall force the Yankees to send reinforcements. In Peru itself, many new figures, practically unknown.
I don't think that that she's an innocent pawn. I don't think he's an innocent pawn. I can see if I was someone in a different country and I lived in a different country, in another country, well, just say I live here and China decides to come here and rob our country of our resources, which they're actually kind of doing because they're buying up our land. We borrow money from them, right? So they're kind of doing it in a different way without, showing us their hand. I imagine if I were that person and I was brave and I would stand up, what would I do? I don't know. I definitely wouldn't do this, but I don't know. Yeah, there's two sides to this coin. And both are, well, they're only imperialistic if he wants to go and invade other countries and take their resources. I'm just trying to decipher the language. I don't think he's a good guy. I'm saying there's a lot of lies that go on in our world, and I'm trying to decipher.
Are now reorganizing the guerrilla. Little by little, the obsolete weapons, which are sufficient for the repression of small armed bands, will be exchanged for modern armaments, and the U.S. military aids will be substituted by actual fighters until, at a given moment, they are forced to send increasingly greater number of regular troops to ensure the relative stability of a government whose national puppet army is disintegrating before the impetuous attacks of the guerrillas. It is.
Yes, Julian, I agree with you. Yes, I remember where he traveled. I do 100%. He wanted to throw the imperialist America out of every single one of those countries. When we covered Operation Gladio, the United States went country by country by country, one at a time, some two at a time, and installing puppet governments. And then what they did is you have like GMC, you had the Rothschilds, you had the Rockefellers going in and setting up businesses and industries and taking control of the economy through that. And private ownership for people in that exact same country was 5%. 5% was owned by the people. The rest, I think 20%, 15%, 5%. So 20, around 20, 25% was owned by the government. And the rest was owned by the United States. So this is what these people were fighting against. I'm not saying what he did was right, but that's what they're fighting against.
It is the road of Vietnam. It is the road.
And in that process, they don't tell you this, that between 1974 and 1985, just in Argentina alone, 30,000 people were killed with the help of the Vatican, the CIA, and their guerrilla warfares. Do you know what I'm saying? And they weren't communists. They said the people were communist revolutionaries coming up, and they weren't. They were just tired of their way of living because they didn't own anything.
That should be followed by the people. It is the road that will be followed in all America, with the advantage that the armed groups could create coordinating councils to embarrass the repressive forces of Yankee imperialism and accelerate the revolutionary triumph. We must bear in mind that imperialism is a world system, the last stage of capitalism, and it must be defeated in a world confrontation. The strategic end of this struggle should be the destruction of imperialism.
Sorry, I've got to rewind just 3 seconds.
System, the last stage of capitalism, and it must be defeated in a world confrontation. The strategic end of this struggle should be the destruction of imperialism. Our share, the responsibility of the exploited and underdeveloped of the world, is to eliminate the foundations of imperialism. Our oppressed nations, from where they extract capitals, raw materials, technicians, and...
So they're saying they extract our capitals, raw materials, technicians. So they're scientists, they're technicians.
Cheap labor, and to which they export new capitals, instruments.
And they do. So they go in. They've done this in Haiti. They've 100% done this in Haiti, where they go in there and they exploit them for their resources. There's $20 billion worth of gold in there and other mineral resources as well. And they go in there and they're supposed to build buildings or whatever. They haven't done any of that stuff. Just think of Clinton's. And so then they exploit the people for cheap labor. So they work them to the bone in these mines or wherever these mineral resources are, and they don't pay them anything. So they're poor. They go in there and they make the people very, very poor.
Of domination, arms, and all kinds of articles, thus submerging us in an absolute dependence. The fundamental element of this strategic end shall be the real liberation of all people. A liberation that will be brought about through armed struggle in most cases, and which shall be, in our America, almost indefectibly, a socialist revolution. While envisaging the destruction of imperialism, it is necessary to identify its head.
Okay, so this guy definitely would drop a bomb on the United States. If he had access to missiles and if he had access to a nuclear bomb, he would definitely go and drop a bomb on the United States. So this is just one man. And he wasn't even that good at organizing it. It seems like he was loved, but he wasn't that good at organizing. Now think of every single country. We got Venezuela. We've got Africa. We've got Vietnamese. We've got people from China. We've got people from Mexico. Think of all of these countries that we have done this to. And the hatred that they have towards us because they think that we, the people, are doing this, not necessarily just our people of the government. And these people don't believe in turn the other cheek. That's kind of what I'm getting through this. And I'm not to put aside all the other stuff, but I can understand why these invaders are coming to our country. No, he wasn't taken out for total. I think, didn't it? Oh, it didn't get into it in this one. I'll probably do the document. I'll do the other documentary that I watched earlier. It wasn't a documentary. It was a talk from a CIA agent. It went into the detail. And yeah, he did say that he would drop a nuclear bomb on us. But they actually didn't want to kill him. He was worth more alive than he was dead.
Which is no other than the United States of America. We must carry out a general task with the tactical purpose of getting the enemy out of his natural environment, forcing him to fight.
Getting the enemy out of their natural environment. Forcing him to fight for that.
In regions where his own life and habits will clash with the existing reality. We must not
This is why globalism is a failed experiment. You can't take people with different cultures and force them to mesh together. We had good night, Miles Culture Play. Thanks for joining and thanks for your input. You're making me think a lot. My position's changing a lot, but I'm starting to see it from a different lens of the globalists, like forcing these people to mesh and they have different, some are Catholic, some are Muslim, some are Hindu, some are Jewish. You take these people and you force them to live together, and we don't think the same. Because they're still trying to go to one world government. They believe that we have to all meld together because it causes chaos.
Underrate our adversary. The U.S. soldier has technical capacity and is backed by weapons and resources of such magnitude that render him frightful. He lacks the essential ideologic motivation which his bitterest enemies of today, the Vietnamese soldiers, have in the highest degree. We will only be able to overcome that army by undermining their morale. And this is accomplished by defeating it and causing it repeated sufferings. But this brief outline of victory.
The sad thing is that's exactly what they did to our soldiers in Vietnam. They went all out. They had nothing to lose, and our people died, and it's sad.
Carries within itself the immense sacrifice of the people, sacrifices that should be demanded beginning today in plain daylight, and which perhaps may be less painful than those we would have to endure if we constantly avoided battle in an attempt to have others pull our chestnuts out of the fire. It is probable, of course, that the last liberated country shall accomplish this without an armed struggle and the sufferings.
Oh my gosh, Kari, you just like the whole last 4 series that we just covered, where you're saying they just want everyone to meld together and be the same and equitable. Yes, that's what they want. It goes into DEI and DEI. DEI is designed to, instead of being like math, reading, history, arithmetic, it is emotional learning, how to manipulate behaviors. That's what DEI is about. They want us to be the same. And then they can implement the 4th revolution, which is what they're trying to do right now.
Of a long and cruel war against the imperialists. This they might avoid. But perhaps it will be impossible to avoid this struggle or its effects in a global conflagration. The suffering would be the same, or perhaps even greater. We cannot foresee the future. But we should never give in to the defeatist temptation of being the vanguard of a nation which yearns for freedom but abhors the struggle it entails and awaits its freedom as a crumb of victory. It is
Okay, take this guy out. Take him out of his country. Okay, let's pretend like he's in the United States current day without wanting to be a socialist. What he just said was extremely important. We can't be the vanguard of a country, which means the leader, and expect victory while sitting idly by and hoping for the best. Right? You have to do something about it. I'm not saying revolution. I'm just saying like that's kind of the point. Is you have to do, and I'm not supporting the methods of what this is happening. And I don't know the solution. Everything I learned from history is the sole intent to understand what's happening in the United States right now, because we're right on the cusp of not ever being able to turn back. And that's just the way I feel about it. I don't know. And I don't want to be defeatist.
absolutely just to avoid all useless sacrifices. Therefore, it is so important to clear up the real possibilities that dependent America may have of liberating itself through pacific means. For us, the solution to this question is quite clear. The present moment may or may not be the proper one for starting the struggle, but we cannot harbor any illusions, and we have no right to do so, that freedom can be obtained without fighting. And these battles shall not be mere.
Freedom cannot be obtained without fighting. You can have a republic as long as you can keep it. That is why the Declaration of Independence was set up the way that it was. There might come a time where your country and your leaders are corrupt, and you might have to overthrow them and start over from scratch. It's in our Declaration of Independence.
Mere street fights with stones against tear gas bombs or of Pacific general strikes. Neither shall it be the battle of a furious people, destroying in 2 or 3 days the repressive scaffolds of the ruling oligarchies.
Oligarchies.
The struggle shall be long, harsh, and its front shall be in the guerrillas' refuge, in the cities, in the homes of the fighters, where the repressive forces shall go, seeking easy victims among their families, in the massacred rural population, in the villages or cities destroyed by the bombardments of the enemy. They are pushing us into this struggle. There is no alternative. We must prepare it and we must decide to undertake it. The beginnings will not be easy. They shall be extremely difficult. All the oligarchies' powers of repression, all their capacity for brutality and...
I'm assuming that all of you guys know what oligarchy is, right? Oligarchy is you take BlackRock, Vanguard, all of those big businesses. The oligarchy is the corporate America, and I'm not talking like corporate America, like Microsoft, Amazon. So you have these big companies that own so much of the economy that they control the leaders and they control what goes on. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Correct. It's not the same version of our freedom as either. No, I agree with you. Yes, big pharma, all those companies. No, and that's what I'm saying is this is history. This is in 1967. So that is 30. This is 45, almost 50 years ago, right? So history is what can we learn from this guy right now? Whether he wants socialism or not, I'm not for socialism. Is he everything that, I mean, these are his words. So you could take all these different perspectives and you can listen to actually what he's saying and try to understand what he's saying without other people's opinions. Like I don't have any preconceived notions of this guy. I do have biases based off of the United States and what they do to other countries.
And demagoguery will be placed at the service of their cause. Our mission in the first hour shall be to survive. Later we shall follow the perennial example of the guerrilla, carrying out armed propaganda. The great lesson of the invincibility of the guerrillas taking root in the dispossessed masses. The galvanizing of the national spirit. The preparation for harder tasks, for resisting even more violent repressions. Hatred as an element of the struggle, a relentless hatred of the enemy, impelling us over and beyond the natural limitations that man is heir to, and transforming him into an effective, violent, selective, and cold-killing machine. Our soldiers must be thus. A people without hatred cannot vanquish a brutal enemy. We must carry the war into every corner the enemy happens to carry it, to his home, to his centers of entertainment, a total war. It is necessary to prevent him from having a moment of peace, a quiet moment outside his barracks or even inside. We must attack him wherever he may be, make him feel like a cornered beast wherever he may move. Then his moral fiber shall begin to decline. He will even become more beastly, but we shall notice how the signs of decadence begin to appear. And let us develop a true proletarian internationalism. With international proletarian armies, the flag under which we fight would be the sacred cause of redeeming humanity. To die.
Okay, Kari wanted me to look up demigod. A being with partial or lesser divine status, such as a minor deity, the offspring of a god, and a mortal or mortal raised to divine rank. Some Roman emperors claimed descent from demigods, such as Hercules. Or a man who was greatly admired or respected, a former juvenile delinquent who would become a countercultural demigod. Nothing touches a hair on our head of how bad we are off. I agree. Yes, Book of Enoch.
Under the flag of Vietnam, of Venezuela, of Guatemala, of Laos, of Guinea, of Colombia, of Bolivia, of Brazil, to name only a few scenes of today's armed struggle, would be equally glorious and desirable for an American, an Asian, an African, even a European. Each spilt drop of blood in any country under whose flag one has not been born is an experience passed on to those who survive, to be added later to the liberation struggle of his own country.
Okay, good pausing point. So here's another one. A political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using rational argument. Okay. So I'm using argument to persuade them. They're going to appeal to their desires and prejudices.
And each nation liberated is a phase one in the battle for the liberation of one's own country. The time has come to settle our discrepancies and place everything at the service of our struggle. We all know great controversies rend the world now fighting for freedom. No one can hide it. We also know that they have reached such intensity and such bitterness that the possibility of dialogue and reconciliation seems extremely difficult, if not impossible. It is a useless task to search for means and ways to propitiate a dialogue which the hostile parties avoid. However, the enemy is there. It strikes every day and threatens us with new blows, and these blows will unite us today, tomorrow, or the day after. Whoever understands this first and prepares for this necessary union shall have the people's gratitude. Owing to the virulence and the intransigence with which each cause is defended, we, the dispossessed, cannot take sides for one form or the other of these discrepancies, even though sometimes we coincide with the contentions of one party or the other, or in a greater measure, with those of one part more than with those of the other. In time of war, the expression of current differences constitutes a weakness, but at this stage it is an illusion to attempt to settle them by means of words. History shall erode them or shall give them their true meaning. In our struggling world, every discrepancy regarding tactics, the method.
He's saying it right there. History is going to change words and the meaning of words. Interesting.
Of action for the attainment of limited objectives should be analyzed with due respect to another man's opinion. Regarding our great strategic objective, the total destruction of imperialism by armed struggle, we should be uncompromising. Let us sum up our hopes for victory. Total destruction of imperialism by eliminating its firmest bulwark, the oppression exercised by the United States of America. To carry out as a tactical method the people's gradual liberation one by one or in groups, driving the enemy into a difficult fight away from its own territory, dismantling all its sustenance bases, that is, its dependent territory. This means a long war, and once more we repeat it, a cruel war. Let no one fool himself at the outstart, and let no one hesitate to start out for fear of the consequences it may bring to his people. It is almost our sole hope for victory.
I figured out. Okay, so now I know where he's coming from. So when Fidel Castro and him, they do the revolution, and they take power, they're making changes. And because the United States had put all these sanctions in place and embargoes, they got desperate. They went to Russia. So you have Fidel Castro, who's probably reasonable, right? It's probably reasonable because he ended up living till he died of natural causes. So you have Fidel Castro. He's talking to the leader of Russia, and they're giving them aid. And just the fact that these two countries are talking together, Che Guevara is thinking, oh, we can use the Russian missiles, we can use the Russian nuclear weapons, and we can attack the United States because the United States are the ones that are doing this to us. Those imperialist people wish harm. I'm understanding where he's coming from finally. So he had these hopes that was a possibility. Well, because Fidel Castro was reasonable and JFK had cut out this communication with the CIA. He only talked to his brother, and he created a direct line to Russia. And with that direct line to Russia, and he actually used a priest from the Vatican, who he thought was good. That's another long, different story. But anyway, that's how the Vatican and the CIA knew what JFK was doing because of the priest that was in a high position that was the go-between to Russia. So they come to a resolution. The Cold War ends, and Che Guevara is still angry at the United States and wanted revenge. That's what I'm getting right now, because everything he's saying is revenge against the United States, and he uses the United States and imperialism in the exact same light, oligarchs. I could be wrong. That's what I just understand from all of this so far.
we cannot elude the call of this hour. Vietnam is pointing it out with its endless lesson of heroism, its tragic and everyday lesson of struggle and death for the attainment of final victory. There, the imperialist soldiers endure the discomforts of those who, used to enjoying the U.S. standard of living, have to live in a hostile land with the insecurity of being unable to move, without being aware of walking on enemy territory.
So he's saying right now, if the United States had to live like we did, living on your own land, but being afraid to move without being aware of walking on an enemy, right? Yes. He's very angry at the United States. So I don't know what the United States did to him because I haven't got that history.
Death to those who dare take a step out of their fortified encampment. The permanent hostility of the entire population. All this has internal repercussion in the United States, propitiates the resurgence of an element which is being minimized in spite of its vigor by all imperialist forces. Class struggle even within its own territory. How close we could look into a bright future should 2, 3, or many Vietnams flourish throughout the world with their share of deaths and their immense tragedies, their everyday heroism and their repeated blows against imperialism, impelled to disperse its forces under the sudden attack. And
this is how the rest of the world saw the Vietnam War. Remember, our troops came home and they were spit upon. They killed lots of people, but they ended up not winning this war, right? So he's thinking if we could do the same thing. It's not reasonable. It's not realistic, but that's what he's thinking.
The increasing hatred of all peoples of the world. And if we were all capable of uniting to make our blow stronger and infallible, and so increase the effectiveness of all kinds of support given to the struggling people, how...
No, Kari, the sugar plantation was important to America. That wasn't the importance of Cuba. Cuba is where they refined cocaine and heroin. It was very important to Operation Gladio, and that was a big key part of the industrial war, the industrial war complex. There was a very vital role. They made it appear to be about the sugar, but that's not what it was about.
How great and close would that future be if we, in a small point of the world map, are able to fulfill our duty and place at the disposal of this struggle? Whatever little of ourselves we are permitted to give, our lives, our sacrifice. And if someday we have to breathe our last breath on any land already ours, sprinkled with our blood, let it be known that we have measured the scope of our actions and that we only consider ourselves elements in the great army of the proletariat. But that we are proud of having learned from the Cuban Revolution and from its maximum leader the great lesson emanating from his attitude in this part of the world. What do the dangers or the sacrifices of a man or of a nation matter when the destiny of humanity is at stake? Our every action is a battle cry against imperialism and a battle hymn for the people's unity against the great enemy of mankind, the United States of America. Wherever death may surprise us, let it be welcome, provided that this our battle cry may have reached some receptive ear and another hand, may be extended to wield our weapons, and other men be ready to intone the funeral dirge with the staccato singing of the machine guns and new battle cries of war and victory.
I would like to take a moment to thank all of my patrons who fund.
Okay, so this is the guy. Let me do a copy and paste his channel right here. Actually, let me see. Go give this guy a follow. He's taken several of that one leader from Germany during World War II. He's taken some of his speeches and he has translated them using AI. So he does a good job. So give him a follow and support what he does. It's very interesting to like language is definitely a barrier, right? You can tell your people, you could tell the world whatever you want them to. Oopsies, wrong one. To believe if there's a language barrier. Let me paste it over here in case anyone wants to follow him. I don't know if he's on Rumble yet or not. I don't see if he does have a Twitter or X account. But to hear it from his own words, right? The socialism communist part, that's not really my main focus of the whole entire thing that we did today. My more focus was from the eyes of Operation Gladio. And if you guys don't know what Operation Gladio is, I have done 6 parts to the series. They are on Rumble. And we listened to a book called Operation Gladio by Paul Williams. And it is the very Good night, Wim. Thanks for joining us. Good night. From Paul Williams. So it's the Operation Gladio. Everything in there I have been able to source. I've been able to find, look it up either through Brave or through Google searches. I've been able to validate everything that he's saying in there. So the point of watching this was to see this Che Guevara and see it from Gladio eyes. And I do know that he was killed by a CIA agent who the Butcher of Leon helped to orchestrate that to his capture. So there was a lot of moving parts that go into this. Yeah, I kind of feel like he got disappointed in Fidel Castro because he sought peace versus blowing up the United States, and he was angry with them. I had a PayPal. So I have Venmo and I have Cash App. Why I don't have PayPal, they charge a lot. Cash App, you can change your screen name so you can hide yourself also. They take less money. And PayPal, I had a PayPal. And what they did is they changed my profile and changed like everything on it to where I could have been doxxed. So I canceled it. I found out within a couple of days and I canceled it right away. And they gave me no thumbs up, no warning, nothing. Hi, Daniel. How are you? But guys, I appreciate you. So I'll give you my links. You can donate here or you can log into Rumble. They allow you to donate over there, or you could become a member on Rumble, or you can follow me on locals.com. So here is my thing here. Let me go to edit. Hold on, I gotta hide it and edit. See, copy. All right, hold on. So these are my links. So my Cash App there and my Venmo is there. And thank you, Julian. So yeah, you guys can go ahead and share those if you'd like, or you can donate if you like. If you don't have a Cash App, I was nervous setting it up. I actually like it better than anything else that I've done because it's private. Anyway. Okay, where was I going? So the whole purpose of this is Operation Gladio, which I've covered. You guys should really go back and watch that series. It's where every single person should start when they're trying to understand the shadow government. I covered it in very good detail. So we listened to a chapter a night, and I actually made slides to go with it. And thank you, LW. So I made slides and I try to be, I would listen to it. I took notes and then I made slides, and it just goes into just detail of how Operation Gladio was set up. And I kind of went through it just briefly. It was after 1947, 45-ish, World War II was coming to an end. We had the OSS and the Dulles brothers didn't want it to come to the end. We had the Rothschilds donated, and the Mellon family donated to the OSS. After World War II, the OSS was supposed to come to a complete halt. It was supposed to be done. And it was an operation, secret information gathering thing. And they would do covert operations, assassinations, and that type of thing, and propaganda. Okay, so World War II ends. They don't want it. They don't want the OSS to go away. So these guys create a CIA because before, so this was actually going on years and years before. So going clear back to the 1800s. However, it was illegal. If they got caught, they're going to go to prison, right? So then they get the United States government to set up the CIA. The Dulles brothers, with Rothschilds backing, go and they recruit business owners, hotel, all the elites, right? Hey, why work hard when you could donate money to this and we're going to make you lots of money? So they create the CIA. And so the government creates a CIA. They have CIA directors. And then they have this little black shadow government CIA. And the way that, like I was telling you before, the Dulles brothers recruited the mob, and they would bring heroin into Harlem and to the Bronx in California. So they would sell the heroin there. They would get the money. The mafia would get the money. They would funnel it, launder it, get war bonds, government bonds. They would cash them in, bring them to the Vatican. So they laundered it through Mexico and all these places, everywhere throughout the whole entire world. They had these banks. They would end up at the Vatican. And then the Vatican took 10%, and the rest was dispersed at various banks set up by Sindona and so Sindona was the big, huge banker. Lucky Luciano was part of it. The Corsican Mafia was part of it. So there goes the money. So the CIA gets the money through various black operations or banks, or the Vatican would just donate to something, and then they would end up with weapons. They would take the weapons over to Thailand, Laos, that area. They would give the weapons to the people over there, and they were actually fighting South Korea, North Korea, because they were fighting off communism. So they supplied weapons to these people. And so for the weapons, they get heroin, mix and repeat. And then, so they started with heroin that was grown from the poppy in Thailand. Then in South America, they set up operations because they needed more money. They needed to be able to overthrow more governments, right? It's to create coups, train people in terrorism, train people how to, pretty much, they teach them propaganda. So Operation Mockingbird, pay off newspapers, studios, movie theaters, Paramount, you name it. Okay. So lost my train of thought for 1 second. So anyway, they needed more money. So in South America, they were setting up the cocaine trade. And so from 1974 to 1985. Anyway, from 1967, which is when this guy died. That's why I was curious what connection he had to Gladio. I don't know that much from this. I'd have to do more research to see if there's a connection, but I do understand his mindset. And I'm actually going to message someone to see. But anyway, so then they set up the cocaine trade in South America, and they overthrew a bunch of governments. Lots of people died, and they set up so that's when they started the CIA, got in bed with the cartel. Everything was set up. The Vatican had everything set up for laundering money. And from there, they brought drugs into California. And this is where it gets really interesting. So you have heroin addiction and you have cocaine addiction. What is the next phase of all this? Think of all the people high up that own rehab facilities. Well, we've got a heroin problem, so they would set up rehab centers. And there was another avenue of them making money. And JFK Jr. owns rehab facilities. And I want to dig into that and see if there's a connection. Yeah, JFK was wanting to get rid of all these organizations. I do not think that JFK knew what was going on. I honestly think that he was not wrapped up into this. I think he knew the CIA was bad. I really think that the priest that he was communicating with, this is just my opinion based off information, that JFK was communicating with Russia, and JFK had cut the CIA out and all normal forms of communication. He set up his own phone line directly to the White House. Okay. But he had this priest that was from the Vatican. So you saw this whole Vatican triangle. They put people in positions of power that in high up close to the Vatican. So priests, bishops, that type of thing. So I think that that's how the CIA knew what JFK was doing. So 40 likes. Woo, woo. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. Anyway, so then that he had to be taken out because he didn't want to go to war with Cuba. He didn't want to go to war in Vietnam. He was against all those wars. He was done. He wanted peace. Okay, and I missed some chats because when I am speaking from memory and not reading, I can't keep up on chats. But so that is how Operation Gladio is set up. But if you go, I go into all the key players, all of the people, all the moving parts, all the politicians, and we're halfway through the book, and we are going to finish it. I had to take a break, and I said this before. I got cognitive dissonance because I could validate and back up everything. They are from released CIA documents. Thank you, Kari. Donate or give a tip to Sally on Cash App. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Mac. Are you talking to me? I don't know if you're talking to me. Anyway. Okay, that was a lot of information, guys. But I wanted to see if there was a Gladio connection. But now that I have that information, I'm actually going to message people. Good night, Mrs. Mac. I'm getting ready to go to bed too. I'm tired. I worked. Let's have some personal time. I worked all our personal time. We're done with the heavy stuff. I'm like, oh, so today I had to get up. I had to transplant my tomato seedlings because going out of town this week, and I have to have them transplanted so that when I'm gone, my kid doesn't kill them. So I got my seedlings transplanted, mowed the lawn, weed eated, pressure washed the stairs going down to the house, washed my bedding because I had to wash my duvet. I have to do that ever so often. Change the sheets, make dinner. Yeah, I am going to Arizona for a week. And I left, I think the last time I went was in January. It's a really bad time of year for me to go because right now I'm getting my garden stuff ready. So I've been trying to make sure all that is all in order. It's just a busy, busy day. So yeah, I literally, and then while I'm doing all this stuff today, I was flipping through different YouTube stuff and trying to listen to different documentaries and different stuff to kind of figure out, what topic I was going to cover tonight. I was going to do transhumanism stuff like we were talking about before, but I feel like what we've learned in the last 4 episodes is kind of the plan. And I'm not going to go and dig and beat a dead horse. I'm curious. I'm just curious what it is. And I think it's going to be more like the Matrix. And when they say the Matrix is a blueprint to our life, I kind of agree. I'm thinking that the Matrix is a blueprint of what they want to be. I'm not saying they have the technology or the thing, but the lady who I was listening to, everything is backed up by slides. And I'm going to go through, I think she said she has over 200, 300 slides. I want to go through them all at my own pace and maybe dig deeper into them. I don't know, but it's all documented stuff. It's all there. No, I don't think transhumanism is all that though. You'll have to go back and watch my stuff, Kari. It's not heat the red pill. It's not necessarily like I was thinking cyborg. Yes, they do want to kill people and they do want to grow. Yes, it is eugenics. I think that people get confused about what it actually is, though, is like I was saying, I was thinking cyborg. I'm going to have wires, half human, half man. But we had this disease go through the United States, and there was nanoparticles that were installed in certain people. And those nanoparticles could be key or not be key. I don't know. But I think it's more on making people malleable. Everyone's the same. You will use so it would be more augmented reality. So it's still eugenics, and it's still transhumanism. Instead of them, you'd be in a room and say, I had my virtual reality goggles on, kind of like the Matrix. You're hooked up to a machine, and you're controlling a robot or something. Graphene oxide, to be more specific. But you would be controlling a robot from your kitchen or somewhere in your house, doing nothing, being lazy and fat. So that's why they want us lazy, compliant. That's why they're teaching emotional learning over reading, math, arithmetic, critical thinking. Those things don't exist. They don't want any of those things. Yeah. Be a good boy. We could talk about it on Rumble all you want. And I have gone into a lot of that stuff, LW. I've covered that whole angle a ton, and not on here. Not on here at all. That's why I stayed away from YouTube for so long, because I was too terrified of, well, I'm not monetized anyway, but anyway, I would like to get eventually someday, maybe. So that's what I think, Kari, that transhumanism and eugenics plays a role. I used to think it was going to be a little different than that. They have patents to grow babies now in a lab. Good night, Daniel. Thanks for showing up. I hope I didn't miss it. Don't have timestamps on either of these chats, which kind of sucks. I don't want virtuality. Yeah, it would be fun. And me and Traveling Fools, when I get back from vacation, we are going to go through, gosh dang it, I'm having a brain fart on his name, and I know what his name is. Type in his name so I can tell everybody. Me and Traveling Fools are going to start, it'll be on Rumble and on X. So guys, you'll have to, if you're on YouTube, you'll have to follow me on one of those platforms. It doesn't cost anything. It's, if you know my channel, you'll be able to find me. It doesn't have Eddard Stark. Oh, you want to watch Game of Thrones? You're going to bed. I'm not watching Game of Thrones tonight. No way. Yeah, Graham Hancock. So I guess maybe Hodor. I'm going to do a poll on X, probably, because I'm kind of thinking that I want to start with book 1 and go through all of his books. I think it'd be really cool. And Traveling Fools is going to be, me and him are going to co-host it. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. He goes through the different discoveries of different lands, and he goes through Tartaria, all that stuff. Pretty cool. Dr. Strangelove, do I even know what, I don't know, have I heard of that? Send me a DM so I won't forget, Kari, because I'll forget. Send that to me. Yeah, what time? I don't even know what time it is. I've told all of you guys this before. When I stream, I don't look at the clock because I don't want to fixate. Oh, yeah, I went forever again. I don't want to fixate on time. I want to focus on content. With that being said, everyone, thank you. Oh, I should copy it and paste it. I forgot to send my Cash App. I posted it in here and I never pushed send. So there's my Venmo. There's my Cash App. And I have just one last one right here. So I have a Give, Send, Go that I'm doing for Julian, who is here in our chat. And he's always here for all of my shows. He's my super mod and he's my friend. So here's a Give, Send, Go. He needs a kidney. Both of his kidneys are a bunch of freeloaders who don't do crap. They just sit in there and take up blood and space and don't function. He could use some help financially, not to get rich, just enough to help offset medical bills and buy food and take off work if he has to go to the hospital. So there's that. Let me, I have to hide it first so I can copy it. Hold on. Copy. I'll paste it. So if you can donate, donate. If you can't, share it with someone who might be able to. All right. So there is a link to that. I'm going to post it into Rumble. Did I cover everything, guys? I think I did. So tomorrow night is my night off, and I'm taking a night off. I've been going nonstop for 2 days, and you're welcome, Julian. You're always welcome. So next one will be Tuesday night, and I'm trying to. I don't know. I think we could go through. I'm going to message my friend that used to work. She was Colonel Townsend. I'm going to message her and see if she knows the backstory to Che Guevara and see if it's different than what we've learned. And if it is, then we're going to talk about it. If it's not, I might find something else to talk about or watch the presentation that I don't know if it was CIA or Army. I think it was ex-CIA. Gave a talk about him and went through his history of his life and going up through when he died. It's only like an hour, 20 minutes, I think. It was pretty interesting, but it was different than all three of those narratives. Not different. It was just different information, kind of the same, but kind of not. That makes sense. Okay, this is the point where I start rambling for no reason. So what I'm going to do is say goodnight and thank you so much for being here. This is the most people I've had on a Sunday night, and I appreciate the heck out of you guys. Thanks for the thumbs up. Thanks for being here. You're amazing. And I can't say that enough. And I'm ending in 3, 2, 1.